We are live.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the June meeting of Committee of the Whole Operations. And I'd ask that if you're able to please rise for the reading of the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities that are laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who've served our community and who are no longer with us, so that we must continue to do the work we must in their memory. So please be seated. Gote, has the roll call been taken?
Through the chair, roll call's been taken.
Great. All right, members, does anybody have a pecuniary interest they need to declare regarding any item on tonight's agenda? If so, physically raise your hand. Or Councillor Sluss electronically. Not seeing any raised hands, so we'll move right into the separation of items, and we have two items that are automatically going to be separated. Item 6.1.1, which is a museum funding agreement with the Brant Historical Society. That is being separated because there are delegations. And also item 4 of the Vision Zero Road Safety Committee, Forsyth Avenue traffic calming, as there is an amendment in respect to Forsyth Avenue. Otherwise, the Vision Zero report is not being separated unless someone asks for it. So does anybody want anything else separated? Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
Yes, 6.1.5.
Okay. All right, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.1.2, 6.1.7, please.
So 1.2 is FCM, 6.1.7, Wayne Gretzky Sports Center. Not seeing any other requests for separation of items. I'll now ask Councillor Sluss if you would please move the motion to approve all items that have not been separated. Just have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Caputo, that all items contained for consideration consent 6.1, 6.2, not separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
So before I call the vote, I'll ask the clerk if you would please read the title of the items that we're going to be voting on.
Through the chair, the following items are subject to the vote. Item 6.1.3, Bell Homestead National Historic Site Annual Report and 150th anniversary of the invention of the telephone. 6.1.4, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan 2-year review. 6.1.6, Shetland Lane Road Dedication Bylaw. All items of the Vision Zero Road Safety Committee with the exception of item 4 that was separated. 6.1.9, Police Station Task Force. 6.2.1.1, Minutes Committee to the Whole Operations, May 2nd, 2023. And item 6.2.2, Inclusive Community Plan 2023 to 2026.
All right, take the vote, please.
All items not separated for discussion purposes carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows. Councillors Sullivan, Sluss, McCreary, Carpenter, Samuel, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sicoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, so we'll move on to delegations, but prior to hearing the delegations, I'd like to remind those in attendance that the following rules of decorum as set forth in the city's procedural bylaw apply. And they are that no person shall display any sign or barrier or placard of the meeting other than the materials that, in the opinion of the chair, are legitimate audio visual aids in connection with the presentation. All persons present shall use polite and respectful language and shall refrain from using any language or the making of any gesture that is disrespectful or offensive. All persons addressing council shall speak only on the subject in debate and shall not speak on any other subject, and no person shall applaud participants in debate or engage in conversation or behavior that may disrupt the proceedings. So we have two registered delegations for tonight's meeting. First up is Tim Philp on behalf of the Brant Historical Society, speaking to item 6.1 regarding the museum funding agreement with the Brant Historical Society. So, Mr. Philp, you have 10 minutes to make your presentation inclusive of any questions.
Got that. Thank you, Mayor Davis. Mayor Davis, members of committee and staff that are present, thank you very much for this opportunity to address you on this issue. It's been a difficult time for us trying to make sure that we got all of the information together, but I wanted to come to talk about the motion that was put forth to change our funding, because it was very clear to me that there was a lot of misinformation that was around, and I wanted to make sure that, well, misinformation and rumors, I wanted to make sure that the proper information was available. The project, the Crystal Cottage project, was initially a project that the city approached us for help with. There was a multi-million-dollar development on Market Street between Nelson and Chatham. All of those buildings were going to be raised and a new development put up there. Unfortunately for the developer, around the corner on Chatham Street was the Crystal Cottage, and that building had been designated a heritage building. Now, the Brant Historical Society had the only practical piece of land that could be used to move that building, and an arrangement was made whereby the developer would pay to move the building to a lot beside the museum, and then we would build a foundation to put it on. Now, of course, we didn't have the kind of money to do that, so council indicated that they would participate in that. We went to a contractor and asked a well-known contractor here in town who said it would cost about $100,000 to build the foundation at the time. We said, great. We came to council. Council granted us $100,000 to put the foundation in. And then when we went back to the contractor to say, please build us the foundation, they said, oh, no, I'm sorry. It's going to be a lot more expensive than that. The purpose for the society was to help the city save a building that is unique in our community. In fact, I'm not aware of any other similar building anywhere in the province of Ontario. And so we were happy to cooperate with that. But the idea was that we would get the grant from the city, we would put the foundation in, the developer would pay to move the building, and then also the developer would pay to make any repairs to the building that were necessary as a result of the move and put it back into the same condition it was when it sat on Chatham Street. Unfortunately, the gentleman who moved the building, the first time when he moved his first building was the year I was born. He was a very elderly gentleman. He'd been moving buildings for many years. Unfortunately, I think he was using exactly the same equipment he used in 1953. And as a result, there was damage done to the building. Those of you who are around, and there's a lot of video about that building trundling down the street and bricks falling off of it, etc. It eventually ended up on the site. And when it was sat down on the foundation, we asked the developer, okay, we've got the building here, it's on the foundation, you need to restore this building to the same condition it was in. I have yet to receive a response to any communication I've had with this developer. I guess, as what the young people say, we were ghosted. I also understand that the development project on Market Street is now under power of sale. So that developer is not around. And now we are faced with a situation where we had an unstable building sitting on a foundation that needed a great deal of work to make it reasonable. And the funds, there was no other source of funds. So in an effort to try and I want to make this clear, at the time, the board had made no decision what to do with this building. We were thinking about possibly administration offices. We were thinking possibly about storage. There were a lot of things that we could have done with it. But once the developer left us, that was sort of the death knell of things. Now, we had some resources of our own in terms of an endowment fund that we had access to, and I had to actually go and ask for the funds. And we received money from the endowment fund. And I just want to give you an idea of the money that we have spent on this building. We've had loans from the endowment fund of up to $133,948.11. The fellow that runs the endowment fund is very precise. And we paid the contract, and we had to pay the contractor a lot of extra money because we had to put in a furnace, we had to get the services in. There was a lot of work that needed to be done just to make that building stable. We ended up at the end, we were still short by about $119,000. And so we ended up taking a mortgage on that. So we are into this building a total of $328,616.12. So if anybody has any illusions that the Brant Historical Society was donate a building and council contributed some money to that, and then we were going to sell the building and make a fortune, I can assure you that's not true. I mean, the city actually still owes us half of that grant, and that's why we started looking at what we were going to do with it, and we assumed selling it. The difficulty with selling it is that the building is in such shape, it's almost unsaleable. We did get an offer for basically less than the land that it's sitting on is worth. So the bottom line in this whole thing is that in an effort to try and help the city preserve a very unique structure in the city, as well as to assist in the multi-million-dollar development on Market Street, we got pushed down. Now, there were a million things that happened in between. COVID happened. That's why things stood for so long. We couldn't do anything during COVID. When COVID was over, not only us, but everybody else on the planet, I think, wanted to start some renovations and restart construction. And if anybody about 6 or 8 months ago tried to price a 4x8 sheet of plywood, you'd be considering taking out a mortgage in order to do so. The cost of construction materials went up tremendously. The contractor that we had doing it has done some excellent work. The difficulty is he relies on subcontractors, and a subcontractor wants to come in and get a year's worth of work in order to make it worth their while. We were offering a few days for the various subcontractors. There's a whole saga that went into this, and I think in defense of the decisions that the board made and the decisions that the council made, I think that everybody at the time made the right decisions. The difficulty was when the developer decided to abandon the project, all bets were off, and we've poured money into something to prevent it from being a stranded asset that nobody would want, and also to prevent its further deterioration. I'm not sure that we're along as far on that path as I would like us to be, but that's what we had to do to keep that building safe. So it's important to realize that, as I said, first, this wasn't our project, but we tried to help. It's an important part of our community, and we tried to save that. And not to mention, this multi-million-dollar development that the city was anxious to have put in on Market Street. And it looked like a win-win for everybody. And unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. And I think that gives you a sense of what we've had to do. If anybody wants the entire saga and has a 3/4 of an hour, I'd be happy to sit down and talk with each of you directly. But the fact of the matter is, we are in the hole on this building more than $328,000. And the operational funding that we get and the 3-year agreement that we have as put forward by the foundation, if we do not get that grant, and if the motion goes through as it is expected to go through, we will be in a position where the museum will close, Myrtleville will close because we run that, And I think that's important for everybody to keep in mind as well. And our ability to care for the artifacts of more than 150 years of Brantford's history will be in danger. And the amount of money that we get from the city, the province, the county, and a little bit from the federal government are what keeps these artifacts available. And we have all kinds of plans and things that we're doing to put things online. We're scanning documents. Brantford's history is going to be available to everyone. And I think it's important that we all keep that in mind. And this motion, unfortunately, puts all of that in danger. So I would strongly urge you to allow us to have the funding that the foundation permitted us. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Carpenter, it's time for one question.
Yeah, we've only got 3 seconds left. Tim, I can't ask a lot of questions because I've only got 4 seconds. So could you provide all this information to council in writing?
I haven't, but I have it all here. And when I go home, I will send an email to every member of council with all of these figures and all the
And
information.
will you include in that on your comments, what city officials approached you, who the contractor was, and how the subtrade difficulties were, who they were?
I can provide, I don't know about the subcontractors. I can certainly tell you who our prime contractor was.
Yeah.
And
And
Provide
so
any
we
other
have that in
information.
writing because this is the first time we've heard of anything of this project.
I understand.
And so you're saying the city still owes you another 50,000?
Yes, the city still owes me another 50,000, and that's on top of the grant that we're getting. The 50,000 was part of the $100,000 to build the foundation.
And what would that go towards going
Okay, I
forward?
think that's,
You give us that information for what it will go for.
Yeah.
Yes, so
you certainly can ask Mr. Phil to provide the information in the supplemental email. We can do that outside the meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Phil.
thank you, Mayor
Appreciate
Davis.
you coming tonight and providing us with some up-to-date information as to what happened with the Crystal Cottage.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Now, we have a second
Sir, if
person.
I may ask, interrupt just briefly, in terms of a point of order, could that come to the clerk so that it be available to everybody and to the public as well?
Mr. Phillips indicating that he will send it to the clerk who can make it available to everybody. And I'm sure that was the intent of Councillor Carpenter. So Michael Allen Marion, you're up next. I understand you're going to be speaking to the same item. And I want to make sure that, are you here on behalf of the Brant Historical Society? Because Mr. Philp was. Only one speaker.
Myself.
All right, good. Please proceed then. You have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
There's something I'm supposed to press.
You're good if the red light's on.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of council and committee of the whole. My name is Michael Allen Marion. I thank you for the ability to appear before your committee. I wish to speak on a motion before you and request that funding for the Brant Historical Society be maintained at least the level that it has been approved, because I believe the society has been an invaluable organization in the provision of the historical and heritage legacy to the city of Brantford and the county of Brant. I am a retired journalist, having written for nearly 30 years at the Brantford Expositor and associated publications. During that time, I often covered events held by the society and covered many proceedings associated with its preservation of the two communities' history and heritage legacy. Often, whenever I wrote articles, columns, or stories, I went to the Brant Museum and Archives to do research and find photos for them. I noticed when writing about attempts by the two municipalities to preserve heritage buildings or include them in redevelopment projects, the society's records were often researched and used by developers and the city and county governments in reports and presentations. In fact, the society's records sometimes proved more valuable than those held by the municipal governments, which was why some of their officials went out and did the research. It also has produced numerous videos and podcasts that the public find make very useful information. I must say that I was impressed with the Society's attempt to steer a more sustainable course for its organization while taking on more projects that required an increase in effort and cost. For example, I tracked the reform and buttressing of the museum itself, its artifacts and exhibits during 2017 and 2018, while I was still working at the expositor. I was also impressed with its management of Myrtleville House Museum on behalf of the National Trust and the recent prospect that the Society may soon assume the ownership and operation of that National Historic Site, which is important to Brantford, Brant County, and the area's agricultural and rural heritage. When I retired in late 2018, I wanted to work with an organization that would allow me to give back to a community that had been good to me and my career and had provided me with the means to raise a family. I was encouraged to get involved with the Brant Historical Society and some of its projects, partly because of Myrtleville House Museum. Another reason is the recent agreement that the Society take over the expositor's massive collection of archives, which include records, stories, clippings, and photos spanning more than 150 years. I chair an organization called the Brantford Expositor Archives Working Group, which was set up by the Society. It is made up mostly of retired journalists, editors, and a curator. It has the task of preserving and refurbishing the collection, some of which is in delicate condition, and of offering it all to the public in an accessible manner. These endeavors will require substantial cost to achieve, so I believe it is important that the Society continue to enjoy funding from the city, the county, and other levels of government sufficient to do its job. I find that the Society is increasingly asked to take over and direct properties and records that are important to the area's progress from its storied past toward its promising future. It is imperative to see that the record be maintained and that the organization has the resources and reputation to do that be supported. To do anything less should not be allowed. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions? Councillor Van Tilburg, then Councillor McCreary.
Michael, where do you live?
Where do I live?
Yeah.
I live in Hamilton.
Pretty amazing. And this is important enough to you to come to Brantford and protect our heritage and keep things going. Would that be correct?
Yes, it is. I wrote about it for nearly 30 years.
And you ask me questions harder than I can ever ask you. So think about that.
Sorry.
Councillor McCreary.
Well, it's hard to top Councillor Van Tilburg's inquisition, but I will do my best. Michael, so you have some familiarity with the Brant Historical Society and the Brant Museum and Archives, right?
Yes, I do.
So it's sustained by members that make donations and pay membership charges as well, right?
Yes, that's true. A combination of paying, I think it's $35 a year to be a member. And also there are people who have given donations, contributions over the years.
Yeah, so that doesn't really sustain you, does it? When you figure you might have maybe 100, 150 members at the most?
That's right.
So you rely upon government grants, of which we give one over there. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. And I do want to echo Councillor Van Tilburg's sentiment that it is remarkable that your connection to this community and its heritage persists to the point where you would make arrangements to be driven here tonight and taken home to say a few words on behalf of the heritage of our community and the Brant Historical Society. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Michael. Michael, you're more than just speaking on behalf of the Museum Society Board. You're a member of the board. You've put your name forward to be a member of the board, are you not?
As of the AGM in March 2 months ago.
And how many,
We haven't held a meeting yet of the board that is,
how many members of that board?
pardon?
How many members of that board?
7.
7. Okay. And what, could you provide us with a list of who the board members are, and so we could know how to reach them and speak to them, or if
Sure.
they need funding or whatever? That would be and same way that Councilor McGray says, through the clerk's office, so everyone's aware of that. Thank you for your work, Michael, and your dedication to the community
Yeah.
and to the museum. Are you looking forward to taking over Myrtleville ownership and management?
Me?
Yeah, but well, the board will be, the board will be
no.
doing the management, will they not?
They're doing fine. They've been managing it, as I understand it, for, I don't know, more than 5 years.
Yeah,
at
it's
least.
probably unfair because you're just new. to the
Pardon?
board. Probably unfair question because you're just new to the board.
Yes,
you've been
I'm just-
involved in
I'm
the
just not, pardon?
You've been
Yeah.
involved with the organization for a long
Plus,
time.
it's not really relevant to the matter at hand, I don't think. And any other questions, Councillor Carpenter?
Okay, well, I guess I got to run to the mayor.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Michael Ella-Marion, that very much appreciate you coming tonight and providing us with your wisdom and information based on decades of journalistic experience in our community and commitment to preserving our history and recording our history.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors.
So we'll move on. That's, we just had 2 delegations this evening. And we're now going to move on to consider the items that were separated for discussion purposes. And Councillor Samuel, I believe you have the motion to put those items on the floor for discussion.
Okay. That all items for consideration and consent 6.1 and 6.2 separated for discussion purposes be approved.
All right, so we'll take up the items as they appear on the agenda because that does correspond with the fact that it was the first item that was separated that we had a delegation on, and that's 6.1.1, the museum funding agreement with the Brant Historical Society. And what we have before us, you recall that we had, when this was dealt with before, in the last cycle, we had an amendment, which is before you. And the amendment was put forward by Councillor Carpenter, second by Councillor Hunt. And the amendment, I believe that the clerk can share that for us just to remind us. We'll have to deal with the amendment first, which was to change the annual funding request from what was in the original motion of $46,347 to $29,681. So amendment's up for discussion. Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, in light of the new information, which we had none of before until now, this is the first time we've heard of any of this information. I'd be happy if my board mate is happy to withdraw the amendment based upon the information presented to us here tonight.
I see
Information
Councillor
that
Hunt
council has
is
not had before.
indicating that I believe she agrees with that. Is consenting to that.
Yes, I consent to that.
All right. So we don't have, thank
Mayor,
you.
if I may interject with a point of order, I believe the question belongs to the committee, not to the mover and seconder, since it's the second iteration of it. And I wonder if you might rule on that, Mayor?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll ask the clerk if you can give us some advice on that, please.
Through the chair, section 15.8.8 of the procedural bylaw speaks that although once a motion is moved and seconded, it is part of the committee, belongs to committee. However, with that being said, provides that if the mover and the seconder agree to the withdrawing of the motion, that they are permitted to do so.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. That's exactly how I was going to rule because it made it. It made entirely a great deal of sense to me in helping to abbreviate tonight's proceeding. So the amendment is officially withdrawn as sanctioned by your committee chair tonight. So we'll move into the main motion. Mr. Clerk, if you could please share that for us. Just so we have a refresher on what that exactly says. There we go. So any discussion on the resolution not amended? Councillor Martin, then Councillor Sikoli.
Thank you. Through you to staff, we heard that the second half of the $100,000 grant is still waiting to be issued. Is there a holdup with that? Is there a reason why that hasn't gone forward?
Through the chair to the Councillor Nicole Wilmot, Director of Planning and Development Services. So with respect to the second half of the grant, planning staff entered into, or the city entered into, a site plan agreement for the civil works that are required on the restoration of the cottage. The site plan agreement included a set-off clause that could be drawn from the Cultural Heritage Grant to secure the civil works that are required to be complete on the project. That work has not yet been finalized, completed, or certified. So the holdup would be that we would not want to release those funds as they are used to secure portions of the site plan works that are required under that agreement.
Okay, and I think the original intention was to fund the full cost of the foundation. As we've heard tonight, that cost went up dramatically. Is there any way to increase the grant to offset the increases that the association
through you, Mr. Chair, Brian Hutchings, CEO. I think I don't have the resolution right in front of me, but the resolution is pretty clear. There's $50,000 right up front without any proof of invoices. The second one was where proof of invoices had to come in. They came in May 10th to the city staff. And as you just heard from Ms. Wilmot, that there's a site plan agreement that still needs to be complete. So if council wanted to pass a resolution to increase that, they could, but staff are instructed for 50,000 and another 50,000. We weren't instructed to go any higher.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sikoli.
I want to thank the delegates for coming out and bringing with them this wealth of information. And I want to thank you for all of the extremely important work that you do within our community. And I'm really, really happy to see this amendment withdrawn so that you can continue with your operating costs. I'm going to absolutely be supporting this tonight. And just thank you for all you do. It's no easy feat what you're doing, and it's extremely important work. And I just hope the community now has a little bit of information on what it is you do and how important that is, and why it's important not to nickel and dime the operating costs of these extremely important community partners. So thank you for coming out. Obviously, you've made a difference here tonight, at least amongst us here. So thank you again.
Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you. Well, firstly, I'd like to express my gratitude to the mover and seconder for withdrawing the amendment. We've had enough discourse on this item, and I'm certain that it's been a source of angst for the folks involved with the Brant Historic Society and the Brant Museum and Archives and all their friends and supporters. And indeed, you know, people that give them money are watching this as well. And it's unfortunate that this has persisted for so long. The information which was provided to us tonight has been available. I knew it. Many members of council knew it. Folks who had concerns about that money could very well have asked Sarah or could have asked Brian with respect to finding out what was going on. And it's unfortunate it came to a head. But again, I want to express my thanks to the two Ward 4 councillors for taking this off the table for us. The work that these folks do in our community is irreplaceable. Their artifacts are irreplaceable, and you know, don't think that the city of Brantford can take this task on without considerable, I don't even want to look staff in the faces to see the amount of work that would be involved if we had to do this. I do want to ask a question though, of the CAO, if I may. And my memory gets, it gets worse by the year. Now, it seems to me that there was a time when we had a fund available to organizations like this that would help support their capital needs, because part of the problem with all these organizations is keeping the lights on and the electricity on and being able to pay some staff to keep the doors open. So I wonder if we once had a fund like that and what became of it.
There's a, do you want to speak to this, Sarah, or Joelle? Sorry, if I can.
Thanks through you, Chair Davis. The fund I believe you're referring to is the Cultural and Built Heritage Fund. So that was receiving a portion of the casino proceeds in accordance with the casino use of casino funds policy up until at some point during the pandemic, because we weren't receiving casino revenues, those transfers were put on hold until a full review of the policy could be undertaken. So that review is being undertaken and will be brought back to council in September.
My memory is pretty good to recognize. I think that passed by a vote of about 9-1 or 2 at the time. So the report's coming back to council. Council certainly could, prior to receipt of the report, bring forward a resolution to recreate that on the same terms and conditions as we did previously, Joelle.
Certainly council could, yes, but I suspect that we'll be recommending some reestablishment of that program through our recommendation that we bring back.
And did you mention a date?
It'll be coming to the Finance Committee in September.
September, okay. And so come September, we could attribute a portion of the entirety of the 2023 casino funds to that account for 2024.
Once the policy is finalized through that process, any of the allocated funding beneficiaries would start to receive funds right away from that. I think if we start looking at allocating funds prior to that point that have perhaps accumulated in there, we'll need to look at that time, because the casino revenues have already been used for a number of other initiatives this year.
That's excellent news. Thank you very much.
Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you. So to the CAO, we didn't get any proof of invoices till May 10th of this year, just last month.
Yes.
And that's just for the approval of the first 50,000. Is that correct?
No, if I can correct that, the first 50,000 was sent almost immediately upon signing of the agreements, and there was no proof of invoice. The second 50,000 required two things: proof of invoice and also the site plan being approved. The site plan being approved. Yes.
Would all of council be able to get a full report on the process we went through to get here, how we got here, and the reporting processes that were in place for funding?
We have an internal memo we've already produced for myself. Staff have produced myself. I could definitely look at that and then make some amendments and send it to council. Yes.
Yeah, I heard from a councillor that some councils were aware. I know that I was not, and other councils have not been I've talked to. So we'd like to have all the same information so we could have that information about how the program came into place, copy of the contract itself, and what was required going forward. Thank you.
I'd like to make a few comments myself and just say that having moved into this building about 2 years ago, and after moving in here, I didn't have to, but I wanted to do some research on the lot here, which has a storied history, and also this building and some of the features of the building when they were constructed, how they were used, when they fell into disuse. And I have to say, I found the museum and the Brant Historical Society, and in particular the staff, invaluable in the information that they were able to provide to me that I simply could not have obtained from any other source. And certainly, I think has had an educational benefit for me and for those that I've taken on tours through the building, that I can relate to them some details of the history that I otherwise would not have known, but for the fact that I had access to information from the Brant Historical Society. And I'm sure that's been duplicated hundreds of times across the city and over the various decades. So very invaluable service, because our history is important to our community, to understanding where we've come from and where we're going. In respect to what was done, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, the attempt to save the Crystal Cottage, yeah, I would commend those involved. It was an innovative arrangement to save a building that had a great deal of historical significance for our city and for our province. And it's very difficult in these circumstances to find a really effective way to save heritage. Many times it's taking certain aspects of the building and incorporating it into the new building, taking certain features, mimicking that in the architectural design of the new building. But to take a building and transfer it is a pretty unique and innovative method. Unfortunately, it comes with a lot of risks, and we've seen what those risks are. But I would be loath to criticize anyone who was involved in this, that was trying to find an innovative, original way to preserve the history and do it in a practical method such as this, with the involvement of the developer. You know, I say kudos to those that were involved. Unfortunately, didn't work out as well as we wanted to. I think that's due in part to obviously interest rates, COVID. I suspect probably some things internal to the developer that we don't know about. But also, it was an interesting, very progressive development on Market Street North, really hinging on rail line commuter service to Toronto. And certainly the failure of Via Rail to reinstate train 82 has certainly had an impact as well. And hopefully we can soon see that train restored. But this certainly highlights some of the problems we have when we don't have that train service. So wanted to thank Mr. Philp and the board members of the Brant Historical Society, and also the personnel who have provided a real service to our community, and hopefully for many years to come. And lastly, I think it's important that we preserve the funding arrangement and the process, which we removed this from politics and political considerations by having the Brant Community Foundation make the decision on the allocation of the funds coming from the casino. And it's a good system that removes those decisions from the heat of the political forum. And certainly, I don't think we'd want to do anything to undermine what I think is a very sound management process and principle. So for a lot of good reasons, I think this has worked out really well. And we'll have some additional information, which is great, so that we fully understand what happened, so we can avoid something similar happening in the future and better understand how we can protect really unique and valuable buildings. So I thank those involved for that process and adding to our understanding of how it is how you can save buildings such as this. So with that, I'll call the vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor McCreary, you want to speak a second time?
I did so indicate by raising my hand. Thank you, Mayor, for recognizing my hand in the air. I do want to reiterate.
Almost too late.
Lest it, sorry?
It was almost too late.
I know. Good catch. I do want to reiterate the point that I made that we don't keep secrets in here, and that the way we work as councillors is that we interact with staff about what comes on the agenda. So if I have a question about something related to planning, I will contact Nicole. If I have something related to building, I'll contact Andy. That's how we work. You know, there's an availability of staff and availability of interacting with other councillors and the public in terms of finding out what goes on in here. So I don't want folks to take the impression that there was anything kept from members of council or hidden from members of council, because the information is available for the asking. Again, I do offer my gratitude for having the withdrawal of the amendment, which would have dragged us through another round of debate and acrimony and another round of bad press for our folks at the museum.
Councillor Carpenter.
I guess all that was germane to the discussion. Just speaking to it, when we heard recently that all members of council are given the same information, I guess if you know what question to ask. But I would like us to just get the information as a matter of course, not having to ask for it. And I'd like to, as I said earlier, I'd like to know all the contracts, how much did it cost? Why did it go overrun? What were the problems? And what we can do going forward in a learning process to make sure that similar instances where we provide funding, that we're getting proper reports back and information back in a timely manner to know what's going on. Secondly, could this CAO enlighten us? Because we keep hearing that the Community Foundation provided this funding. My understanding that's not correct, that it came from the council funding from the casino funding. Could you please clarify? Or maybe Joel could clarify that.
I'll if I could jump in and then Joel, just a couple things. On the information being received, I didn't realize when answering you, Councillor Carpenter, earlier, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak, that last week on Thursday, June 1st, we sent out a private and confidential memo with the agenda regarding the subject. That memo I mentioned actually went, and if we'll resend it after this meeting as well, regarding staff's position on this. The other questions you're asking are probably more germane to the presenters, that they committed to send you back on details what happened to the project. Staff don't know that intricacies what happened to the project. We weren't project managing that. The $50,000 the original 50,000 was, go ahead, Joelle.
Thanks, Brian. The original 50,000 was from the council priorities reserve.
Yes.
And the second 50,000 was provided from the cultural and built heritage reserve in lieu of an application to that grant program. So the community foundation itself was not a player in this.
In any of the 50,000 or the other second 50,000, they weren't involved at all. Just to correct that for the record. Thank you.
And the last 46,000, Councillor Carpenter, that's where the community foundation was involved. That's just the general operating grants, not.
Yeah, the general operating grants. Yeah, I'm aware of that. Thank you.
Yeah, just a point of personal privilege. That's in fact what I was talking about, that because the amendment suggested that we change and fiddle with the amount that was given to us by the Brant Community Foundation. I thought that was inappropriate. But Councillor Martin?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that point as well, that the resolution deals with money from the community group, the community foundation. So the community foundation money is what is being given in the grant, which is what this resolution is about. So that is accurate information, that it was the community foundation that's giving this money. And you were correct in your statement that we were politicizing that when we'd gone to great lengths to take politics out of that whole process. Which has been very successful since we've done that. So it's very important that we continue that and not interfere politically in that process. And I'll be happy to support the foundation's agreement to forward this money to the Historical Society. Thank you.
Councillor Hutt?
Not to belabor the point, but the wording of the amendment, that was actually a staff recommendation versus asking for $50,000 back. So it was a staff recommendation to take it from the operating funds. So that was not a decision of Councillor Carpenter when he drafted the amendment. Okay, so.
Okay, let's
off the table, so it doesn't matter.
call the vote. And Mr. Clerk, would you please take the vote? Unless. Vote's been called. Sorry, Councillor Van.
That's Karen, want clarification on the vote. What's a yes and what's a no? What is the outcomes?
Yeah, so yeah, sorry, that was just shared for us by the clerk. So yes is yes to the original resolution, which really had nothing to do with the 100,000. It really has to do with the annual funding to the Brant Historical Society, as you see on the screen before us. So you're saying yes to the 46,347 to the next three of you. Okay, so I'll call the vote, please.
Item 611 carries on recorder vote of 10-1. Members of council voting in favors are as follows. Councillors Samuel Van Tilborg, Hunt, McCreary, Martin, Celeste, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councillor Carpenter.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to raise a point of personal privilege, please.
Yes, go ahead.
I can on this section. Just like to correct a statement. It's not to affect the vote. When staff are asked to produce amendments or nominations, notice of motions, they are following the direction of councillors. We don't create that amendment that was referenced was created by staff for the councillor. Was not created by staff outside of the councillor direction. So I want to make sure that's very correct to people. We work in conjunction with the councillors and all our notice of motions. The councillors own those. We help them with the wording as well as amendments. We don't set those amendments. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that clarification. So let's move on to item 6.1.2. It's reference to the FCM request to submit expression of interest for a board meeting. Councillor Carpenter, you asked for this to be separated.
Yes, to staff, the expression of interest is, so we go forward with the expression of interest, and if we're selected, others could be selected as well. Would that be fair to say that?
Through the chair, Sarah Monroe, Director of Economic Development, Tourism and Cultural Initiatives. Through the chair to Councillor Carpenter, that is correct. We will report back per this resolution on whether we are successful and also what the amount of funding we would require to host the meeting.
So if we're successful, then we're already picked. Now we're obligated if we're successful. Would that be correct?
Through the chair, there is no obligation. At this point, we are submitting an expression of interest. That expression of interest and the bid, there would be an agreement between the corporation and FCM to host a meeting, and that would be brought forward to council for the next step of approval. There is no commitment after we've been responded to from an EOI.
And from the report, it says that the expression of interest, the cost for the city could be north of $30,000.
Through the chair, that is correct. We're not looking for a specific amount to commit to at this point. We would bring forward several options at the next phase.
Okay, and are others being requested to submit requests for proposals?
Through the chair, this organization sent in an e-newsletter asking for expressions of interest from all municipalities who are on their e-news list.
Okay, and so this recommendation comes from economic development, that this would be a good thing to do.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
I'm just trying to get the chicken and the egg requirements here first. The FCM Board of Directors, do they first tell you what those requirements are? Or do they wait until you've won the bid? Because I'm reading here where it's saying you will work with the FCM directors regarding hotel accommodations, meeting space, childcare, and what have you. Is that happening between now and the 30th, or is that come after you put numbers forth for a bid?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilburg, we will work on that in negotiation when we provide an expression of interest. So we'll provide them with some options. However, they would be subject to council approval, and we would be looking at a modest amount due to the significant amount of funding required for this project.
All right, thank you.
Councillor McCurry, then Councillor Slauson.
Good work. FCM has 444 community members, is that right?
Through the chair to Councillor McCurry, that is correct.
And would it be safe to assume that most of those municipalities would be represented at this meeting? Or is it a regional meeting?
Through the chair, these meetings do bring most of the municipalities. So we're looking at about 250 up to 250 attendees.
And that would be people who might attend an FCM conference in a lesser city like perhaps Barrie, but to come to Brantford, I'm sure with all we have to offer, we'd probably get greater than average participation, right?
Through the chair, due to our location, which Brantford definitely covets as one of its assets, we would expect that there would be several people attending.
And have you done the pulse of what you think the economic benefit to the community would be with respect to the hospitality industry?
Through the chair, we have run the event through the Tourism Regional Economic Impact Modeling tool, and those numbers are included in the report. We do also include the social and community benefits as well, so we will be adding those in addition when we bring forward the fulsome recommendation to request funding to host.
Excellent. Good luck and good work.
Councillor Sluss.
No, I took my hand down, Mr. Mayor. The question was asked. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other questions. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Item 612 carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows. Councillors Sullivan, Celeste, McCreary, Carpenter, Samuel, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, we'll go on to the third item that was separated, which is item 6.1.5, the Brantford Santa Claus Parade 2023. Councillor Sullivan, you asked for this to be separated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I actually just wanted to applaud Dave Carroll and the Freedom House team for stepping forward on this. As we know from the city having to put this together last year, we know the amount of work and hard effort that is put into it. And I think it's second to none that somebody else is willing to step up and take that on. I just wanted to thank them and show them my full support.
All right, please take the vote, Mr. Clerk.
Item 615 carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows. Councillors Sullivan, Celeste, McCreary, Carpenter, Samuel, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right. Now we'll move on to the fourth item that was separated, item 6.1.7, the Wayne Gretzky Sports Center entry feature. Councillor Carpenter, you asked for this to be separated.
Yes, this feature that's being recommended here is it entranceway feature off of Fairview Drive? Is that where the location is?
Through you, Mayor Davis. Yes, that's correct.
And the cost for an entranceway signage is $25,000. Would that be correct?
This includes the pole that it would sit on as well.
Is it lit? Will people be able to see it at night?
We're looking for it to, we're going to be looking into that lighting if that's possible.
Or it could be solar, could it not?
Could be, yes.
Oh, okay. Now, this is going to be in time for the Wayne Gretzky celebration, 10-year anniversary celebration?
Yeah. Through you, Mayor Davis. Yes, that was one thing we were aiming for.
And the celebration of Wayne Gretzky's in the fall of 2023, would that be correct?
That's right.
Now, how much is budgeted for that celebration? I believe it's 30,000 from council or 20,000, 30 from council and some raised publicly, but a total of $50,000 is the budget?
I thought it was 10. 23.
I believe the budget, if I can, through Mr. Chair, it's $25,000.
Yeah, 23.5.
And there's not money raised from the public for this?
No.
So the total budget is funded by council. I just want to be clear.
So there may be 20,000 in sponsorships and donations. What we're aiming
On
for.
top of the 23.
Yes.
Also, so that way it's about $43,000 in funding. So the budget must be $43,000 if you're going to get funding. So question I asked, how much is the budget?
Sorry, I was waiting for Aaron to come up, but yes, 43.5.
Okay, 43.5 is the budget for the 10th anniversary celebration of the Wayne Gretzky Sports Center. All right, thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
So if I recall correctly, we were actually looking for a traffic control mechanism for the entranceway. Was that a pedestrian crossing or was that lights to have for car traffic flow?
Mark Jacklin, Director of Operational Services. Through the mayor, the resolution was asking for us to look at signalized intersection. And we have done studies, but unfortunately we weren't able to do the studies until after the main season, hockey season. So we didn't, the current studies that we have did not support a signalized intersection.
And it was also, I think I read it was rejected by the community. So my question then is that we've moved from traffic control to a sign. And what was paying for the traffic control? I'm curious to know how the budgets goes to council priorities for something that clearly should be belonging somewhere else.
Through Mayor Davis. So the undertaking and direction of staff was to see if a traffic control is warranted. And that was part of the resolution because the goal was to have a entry feature for the driveway. So if there was a warrant, because we're speaking in ifs because it's not warranted, we would be coming forward with an ask, say similar funding source for the traffic signal. Because that is not, it was not in our approved capital budget. that we
Wasn't
brought
budgeted.
forward. Yeah.
So we would be scrambling one way or the other. So what's a traffic signal cost? It's pretty costly, right?
Well, through the chair, you're typically looking around $250,000, but in this situation, because of hydro poles and other features that are in the neighborhood or in that intersection, it would be much more expensive.
Right. And so and that's the same reason why you say we're at 25,000 for this sign was a pole.
Your chair, that's correct.
Still very expensive, but signs are.
Counselor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe the warrants that weren't met were taken in April, as I understood it from your report. But I think I also read that you're going to do a traffic study once the hockey season is in full swing to get a more accurate picture of the coming and going there. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. And have we talked, part of the report was talking about wayfinding signs, I believe on the 403 and looking at budgets to do that. Have we talked to the electronic sign people? The sign that we have that's lit that says, I believe, Wayne Gretzky Sports Center, that's supposed to be visible from the 403 is really a total waste of hydro. You can't see it for the trees. But in conversations with the sign folks, they're quite prepared to work with the city on their money to put a large electronic sign that would face, and they would deal with the ministry and everything else that needs to be done to put a sign in that location. Have we gone down that road yet?
Through Mayor Davis. So yes, Councillor Sluss, we were in discussions with the ministry as well, the Ministry of Transportation for that approval, but we have been working and issuing a low value quote to actually move that sign to a place where you can actually see it from the 403. There's a break in the trees just eastward towards the property in the back there. So we are working to relocate that sign.
Okay, well, I think more importantly, Mr. Hans, the sign company was quite prepared on their coin to put the large electronic sign that you would see on, say, Brand Avenue, put it there, give the city advertising on it at no cost, and the excess would be sold by them to recover their money for putting up the sign. I guess they're quite expensive. That's the road I was asking if we're going down that road, because that would save the city an awful lot of money, would put a marquee sign out on the 403, and it would certainly, as far as directional go, it would be a godsend, letting people know to get off very shortly. So I guess my question is, are we in discussions with Pattison, or I don't think that's the correct firm name now. I think they've changed names, but the big sign companies, the producers of these signs that operate them within the city already.
Through Mayor Davis, we can provide some more information, Councillor Sluss, on the back property. We weren't ready to speak about that sign with this report. But what I do know is that the time that you get to see that sign on the actual 403 between the trees is really not that much. So that's always plays into the decision of whether we can have sponsorship or advertisement in, but we can take that back and have a look and maybe have some discussions with them. We have not had those discussions.
Okay, because I do believe they indicated they would just elevate the sign above the tree and away they go. So anyway, we can have those discussions, and I think it would be fruitful for the city to do that because they seem quite eager to get involved with the city. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hans.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we had the ward meeting to discuss issues there, one of the things that came up was traffic signal at that intersection. And most of the people there were opposed to signalizing that intersection. But one of the biggest concerns they had was people from out of town missed that entrance because the signage on Fairview is set back from the road. that's why we want to go with this overhead sign that'll be much more visible in both directions. Because the problem is when somebody misses the entrance, they pull into somebody's driveway. Now they're backing out onto Fairview and making another turn to go in the entrance. So it creates all kinds of problems for not only people trying to get into the Gretzky, but also people who live on Fairview. And it exasperates the traffic situation on Fairview with extra people backing out needlessly. So this sign's going to solve a lot of that issue. And I think it's going to go a long way to helping that intersection. So I hope council can support this because it's something that is going to make a huge difference in that area. It's what the residents want. We looked at a bunch of things. We looked at making that a right in, a right out, but that would overload North Park Street entrance. So there's several things that staff are looking at, including in the report to estimates for work next year, because some of them involve some capital costs. And we look forward to having those discussions at estimates. But this is one that will make a big difference right now, not only for people visiting Brantford as the tournament capital to attend the Gretzky Center for hockey tournaments or other tournaments, but it also helps the people living on Fairview. It stops extra people turning into their driveways and backing out, and it reduces all the turning movements on Fairview, which will be a big benefit. Thank you.
Councilor McCurry, you're next.
I'm pleased to see that the mayor has taken a new attitude in terms of allowing folks to perhaps diverge from the subject matter at hand and wander into the weeds. And I see that as a positive. I'm not speaking of my ward mate. I'm speaking of some of the folks that spoke in advance of that. But I want to reiterate what Councillor Martin has said, that what we've got before us is the culmination of some hard work by staff and some very intelligent and interested participation by some of the neighborhood. I wouldn't say that it's indicative of the entire neighborhood that they don't want a signalized intersection there. That's something that if we find the warrant study supports, we'll go to the greater neighborhood and see what their indication is later. But it does tend to be a bit of a nuisance to motorists. We have 2 seasons in the 3rd ward. We have hockey season and we have the rest of the year. And in the Gretzky vicinity, there's a significant difference. Councillor Martin and I take great pride in the Gretzky Center. We had a hand in its development. We hope that the rest of council can demonstrate some pride in ownership and some support for this facility. Sometimes it's lacking. Sometimes, we still hear comments about the cost to do it. But boy, when you talk to people that are in the building, they love the place and it's worth celebrating. And it's worth spending $25,000 if for no other reason than to get rid of some of the inconvenience to the immediate neighborhood by having traffic congestion, by having people in their driveways and the numerous accidents that we see from time to time. So Mayor, thank you very much for such a good job in the chair tonight.
Councilor Caputo.
I don't know if we're still on topic, but you guys brought it up. A question to you, Mark, please. The cost of a street light to put in there, what would that come out to? My understanding it's going to be a couple $100,000.
Through the chair, do you mean a signalized intersection or an actual street light?
Whatever's going to get people in and out of that area, traffic light.
Oh, yes. Through the chair, it's again, you're typically looking at $250,000, but in the situation, we'd have to move some infrastructure and it would be a lot more expensive.
So $20,000 to put a nice sign on there and have people turn probably is the wiser move. You don't have to answer that.
Councilor Carpenter, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to read from page 1 of the report. And because it was talked about some members of council being in the weeds, I'd like to have some assurance. And I'm going to read directly from the report. The executive summary says the Wayne Gretzky Sports Center opened on September 29th, 2013. The 10th anniversary of the opening of the rebuilt Wayne Gretzky Sports Center will be celebrated in the fall of 2023. Report number 2023-146, Wayne Gretzky Center 10th annual celebration was approved by the Estimates Committee at the February 8, 2023 meeting. The report directed staff to review traffic control at the intersection of Fairview Drive and Wayne Gretzky Sports Center. Just to be clear about weeds, to make it clear there. Now, the only thing I would like to ask staff to do, if I could ask staff for a report on the council contingency and the council reserve fund, all expenditures in the last 12 months and where they went, please. Thank you.
All right, not seeing other raised hands, I'm going to call the vote on this item 6.1.7.
Item 6.1.7 carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillor Sullivan, Celeste McCreary, Carpenter, Samuel, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Marn, Caputo, and Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, so that deals with the items that were separated for discussion purposes. Oh, except we do have Vision Zero, and in particular, the Forsyth Avenue section. And that has been separated because I believe there is an amendment. Councilor McCreary, is that your amendment putting on the floor for that one?
It is, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Councilor Martin's the seconder. Reads as follows: the clause C of item 618 concerning Forsyth Ave, traffic calming financial impact none, be amended as follows: the staff be directed to proceed with the install of speed cushions in 2023, funded through the roads and related reserve at a cost not to exceed $25,000. And I would appreciate the support of all members of council who believe that one should support the ward councilors in bettering their environment for their constituents, homeowners, and taxpayers. Staff had a very well received plan to calm traffic on Forsyth, which is something of a raceway despite its configuration, which is not conducive to racing, as are no city streets for that matter. So we did install some of the temporary trial speed bumps last year in the fall. It was well received. It was very effective. It was actually supported by the vast majority of folks in the neighborhood. The only ones who didn't like it were the folks who didn't live in the neighborhood and like to use it as a shortcut. And so we've now eliminated that issue, and some of those folks now take other streets because, as one gentleman said to me, it's a nuisance to have to slow down to negotiate those speed bumps, and he doesn't drive on that street anymore. And I'm sure he'll be watching tonight and he'll probably remind me of our discussion tomorrow. So we'd like to get this done this year. We're assured by staff. Staff did not write this resolution. Staff did find the funding for Councillor Martin and I and suggested a funding source. So thank you to Mark and Joelle for doing that for us. And as I said, you know, we all like to support one another, or at least talk about supporting one another in our endeavors to make our wards better places. And I would hope for everybody's support on this tonight.
Councillor Martin and Councillor Van Tilburg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is something that the neighborhood really wants. The temporary speed cushions did a wonderful job in slowing traffic down. And I think the residents were expecting the permanent ones to be going in this year. Unfortunately, what came through from the Vision Zero was that would take place next year. And the residents are disappointed because they were very effective and they were hoping to have them in place this year. So with this amendment, we can move it up to this year and put it in place so that the people on Forsyth can enjoy the benefit that they've enjoyed last year without missing a year this year. So I hope everybody can support this and move this forward. Thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Are those temporary speed cushions, they reusable?
Through the chair, they are.
Where are they going next?
I don't have that information right now.
So I have two minds of thought. One is we could either have them installed there, it'd probably be the same price, or we have another location for them. But if we're going to put in temporary speed cushions and people then get the feedback, because sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, or they aren't liked for it just doesn't work out right, then at least we have the plan. In other words, if we knew that they were going to stay there and they didn't have to be removed and that there was a positive feedback, we could at least, I know what's happened is that they had the speed cushions removed and people said, what are you doing? You know, you got them there. Now they're not there. And so the counselors have to answer to that. And this is the way. And I think that this is actually the right way. The other thing I want to make it clear, though, is that it's all the taxpayers paying for both the roads and these traffic calming mechanism. So I do think that it is wrong to criticize somebody for using a road, but now they just have to use the road in the way that it is designed in order to be calm in the neighborhood. So like some people think that they own the road. Well, actually you don't. You know, we all use it. So that's taxpayers in the 5th Ward covering stuff up there, and that will be the same vice versa for everywhere we go. So I just want to keep that in mind. But we're all trying to do our best. So will we have an answer on where those speed cushions are going next? Would that be possibly on the next Vision Zero report or something like that? Council even, yeah.
Through the chair, I can get you that information. I can send council an email where they're going.
Thank you.
Great. Councilor Carpenter, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The roads and related reserve funds were the 25,000. What is the balance of that roads and related reserve fund currently that this is being directed to take the 25,000 from?
Through you, Mayor Davis, the balance in the roads reserve is approximately $2 million.
$2 million. Okay. So, so that's fine. I will support this. I always support the ward councillors. I just want to say that there are 4 other items that were directed to 2024. So when this gets to council, I think you can expect a lot of 2023 items. Could you let us know which ones can be done? They were recommended for 24, that if the funding was allocated through council, could be done in 2023, like this one. Just not right now. You could let us know so that, because when we get to council, I'm sure that the ward councillors that want these things done in their wards as well and get the support from the rest of council, same as we're going to get here, could be done at council. Those amendments will be coming forward. Thank you.
Is that possible, staff? Provide that by the,
Yeah, we'll work to provide a memo to that effect when it comes to council.
great. Or before it comes to council. Good. Councilor Martin, do you second that?
Thank you. Just to inform Councillor Van Tilburg, the temporary cushions don't survive the winter, I believe, with the snow plows and whatnot, so they have to be removed. So to put them back in when permanent ones are going in later anyways is kind of redundant. And your question about where they're going next is appropriate because they can be put in someplace to try it out to see what the residents want, permanent ones or not. It's a great way to test the waters because they are temporary. And sometimes the residents decide they don't want them. And if you put in permanent ones, then it's much more expensive to remove those if the people don't want them. So I think the temporary cushions are a great way to go. They have to be removed before plowing season, but yeah, it's something that can be tested and get feedback from the people in the neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, I'll call the vote then on this item, please. Forsyth and the Vision Zero Road Safety Committee report.
The amendment to item 4, the Vision Zero Committee, Forsyth Avenue, carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Councillors Sullivan, Slez, McCurry, Carpenter, Samuel, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, we'll now move to council resolutions. Okay. Call the vote then on the Vision Zero as amended, assuming there's no discussion.
Vision Zero report as amended carries unanimously on a recorded vote of 10-0. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Councillors Samuel, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, Hunt, McCurry, Martin, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right. So I'll move on to resolutions then. Item 7.1, Councillor Samuel.
Central Park Community Garden Water Service, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Tilburg. Whereas on June 19th, 2017, the Downtown Community Neighborhood Association partnered with Equal Grounds Community Gardens and volunteers from both associations, along with students from Central Public School, installed the Brantford's 33rd garden at that time, at Central School located at 135 George Street. And whereas the school expansion in 2020 required the community garden to be removed, And whereas the community garden not only provided food for the downtown community, but created a safe space for those to turn to, it built a community of passionate community members who tended to the garden, a sense of belonging, and it provided the students at Central Public School with education, pride, and accomplishment as they helped implement and tend to the harvest of the seeds at each end of season. Whereas food insecurity is at an all-time rise before the pandemic and certainly has continued to rise during and after the pandemic. Whereas the DCNA's goal to alleviate food insecurity for downtown members and 222 children that are fed through Gifts of the Heart, along with 45 families we support during the week. The gardens provide hope, community, belonging, and a place to turn for food. And whereas both DCNA and Gifts from the Heart are committed to ensuring that no food goes to waste and will work together with the downtown community to tend to the gardens and rescue all unused food before it spoils, to break down and process in order to use in our children's lunches. And whereas recent playground updates provide DCNA with an excellent location to for the reestablishment of the community gardens that were lost in 2020, whereas in DCNA, through Equal Grounds Community Gardens will complete and submit the application form to the Community Garden Committee 2023 deadline, April 1st, 2023, and if approved, enter into community garden license agreement for 2024 growing season. And whereas to accommodate the proposed community gardens, appropriate water servicing comply to city standards is recommended. Now, therefore, it be resolved, A, that the following approval for the Community Garden Committee, city staff be directed to construct a park service complete with a meter chamber and park service box. And B, that the city staff be directed to engage and retain appropriate professional contractor and funds for these costs, estimated to be $25,000 from the council priorities reserve. And if I may speak to that.
Go ahead.
At this time, when the cost of food is continually going up, it's important to support citizens to build skills, feed their community, and continue to build a sense of connection and belonging. So I hope today we can support by helping give them the water that is needed to create a community garden at Central Park. Thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, a while back, I mean, we've had, the school grew, which is a good thing and a good thing for the downtown neighborhood. But I think we all know that those living in the downtown neighborhood probably need these gardens more than anybody else. And so the irony of the schools growing and having to remove the garden, the neighborhood association, and they work closely with the school and the parents there. They wanted us to investigate checking out the park next door and whether there would be able to get water supply. We need this. We know that. We know they need this. The other thing that I was thinking about is how it goes hand in hand with a previous resolution. Previously in our ward for a local park, the citizens have had to fundraise on their own to get a splash pad. And if we have this water source, it's not just something there for the garden, but it'll be putting the infrastructure in that we need for a resolution that's coming forward on possible locations. And again, if you go in that area and see the kids, I think you'll understand why they don't just have a park to play in and romp around in, but they're going to have a park that they can grow in and learn in, and everyone can benefit. I mean, so during that COVID period, we missed having that garden, and enough that we've said we'd make it a priority to bring this back. And hopefully we can do that with all council support. Thank you.
All right, I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. Actually I was at the Via Rail station about a week ago, and a lady approached me who lives in Eagle Place. And she asked me, like it was just by happenstance that I was there and she was there. And she asked me if gardens could be installed at River Green Park, just off Eagle Place. And when she asked me that question, I realized, I don't know as much about the procedure to have a garden established in a neighborhood park as I should. So that caused me to ask a number of questions about what the process and procedure is to have a garden approved. And so I'm going to ask some questions. I assume they'll go to Indy. My first question is, the funding for this is from Council Priorities Reserve. I guess, Joelle, how much do we have left in that reserve?
When we look at all of the requests from this reserve coming up through this meeting, it is almost close to being depleted, about $20,000 balance. There will be a recommendation coming through the Finance Committee later this month with an option to replenish some of that funding.
But as matters stand, we're pretty close to zero on that reserve. All right. So my question to staff is, what is the source of funding for these gardens normally?
Through the chair, the source for the operational costs of operating community gardens is in the Parks and Recreation budget, operating budget under a community garden business unit. So the staff time to provide mulch, to provide water as needed, the operational cost of the water meter in locations where there is a water service. The operating costs are established and funded through.
So it's in the
parks budget. The capital costs to install a new water service, as in the last couple of years, there was capital funding to install one at Johnson Park. Those typically come through the capital budget where there's
Okay,
a
so
requirement for a new
what's the
one.
procedure to have a garden put into a neighborhood park?
The procedure according to the policy is that there's an intake of requests prior to April 1st of each year. Those locations are evaluated by a committee established under the community garden policy, and that there's criteria within the policy in terms of which gardens are considered, and then there is an evaluation of capacity to actually deliver in those.
So what
community
happens
gardens.
if there's more requests than there is money in the budget?
Then there's a decision on what can be supported and what can't.
All right, and did the DCNA, did they apply before April 1st for this garden?
They did not.
All right. And if they had applied, it would be approval of a garden in 2024.
I'm not sure how it would have been evaluated with the rest of the complement of applications for 2023, but there's a possibility.
Well, Rick, it's
that
a little
would,
late to be setting up a garden in 2023, isn't it? I mean, this will be approved.
it is late to start a new garden at this point. Yes.
All right. So why would we agree to fund a garden in a council priority reserve in June of 2023 for a garden to be established in the spring of 2024? Why wouldn't this resolution that staff prepared, why wouldn't it say this is to be referred to the budget, the 2024 budget, similar to what we saw earlier this evening in respect to traffic calming?
To you, Mayor Davis. So this is not a staff prepared report or recommendation. This is a notice of motion that's now a resolution from the ward councilors. So we help prepare and work with the councilors. We had advised that we are at past April 1st, that probably it'd be better to move into next season. But again, if the councilor wishes to move this, we will, it's not staff's prerogative to say yes or no. That's the councilor's decision.
Right. I've gone past 4 minutes, so does anybody else? Yes, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In light of the information that we've received, I'm thinking that it might be more appropriate to turn this down and recommend to the Downtown Community Neighborhood Association that they apply prior to April 1st of 2024. And by the sounds of things, they're very committed to doing this. And they should come to the top of the pile with all the information that's here and be granted the necessary works for 2024 when they'll have time to set up a garden for 2024. As been indicated, it's too late this season. I mean, if you haven't got your plants in by now, you're going to be running up against winter before you can harvest. So I'd like to move that, well, I guess instead of moving a referral, I think we should just defeat this tonight. And with the recommendation to the neighborhood association that they get their application in prior to April 1st, 2024.
Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So through the mayor to staff, the way I read the resolution, what we're voting on is the installation of a water source. So in order for them to come to get a 2024 garden, they need water, which would have to be installed in 2023. Am I correct? It'd be hard to install water before they could grow in 2024.
Through you, Mayor Davis, to the councillor. So there's a if approved in the first recommendation. So this location, how we worked with the councillors, that this still needs to go to the committee because that's the policy, and it may not be approved as a location. So if it is, that growing season would be in 24. And we would work this year. My understanding from the councillors that service be installed this year. And that's why the funding is coming from the council priorities reserve, because we did not have this in our capital budget. Now, if this location was approved this year on time, we would work that into the 24 budget, and you would see that during the budget season.
Okay, so I guess second question, how long does it take to install a water source for a community garden?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Hunt, from getting a quotation from one of our contractors and getting it installed, that could be about a 6-week time span.
Okay.
Councilman Curry.
Mayor, thank you very much. I'd hate to see this opportunity lost. So I'm not sure I'd want to defeat it tonight, but I am a bit confused about the process. So the community garden license agreement is issued by the corporation of the city of Brantford. Is that correct? And that was a yes. And
that is correct. Yes.
Yes, thank you. And how many community gardens are there roughly?
Off the top of my head, I'm going to say between 20 and 25 in a given year.
And do each and every one of those have a water source, like a city water source, other than trucking water in?
No, some are served by trucking water and some are served by water service.
Okay. And so these folks can apply by April of 23 for a license for 24. Is that correct, Dwight?
It would be applied by April 1st of 2023 for a garden in 2023, and then applied by April 1st of 2024 for a garden in 2024.
And the criteria for that would be having a list of volunteers, would it?
That's correct. The policy includes criteria that it needs an organizational support. In this case, the neighborhood association could provide that. It needs to in the application, demonstrate that there's a volume of volunteers that will support the project, because we don't want to go to the effort of creating the space and then have it not supported through the community.
Rick, also, is there a program where we revisit each one of these every year to make sure that 2022's garden has been planted for 23?
Yes, that's correct. Why there's an annual process to reconfirm the locations.
Okay. I wonder if it might be possible for you to provide us with the criteria and the application and all the stuff that goes into folks going through the process and how we adjudicate that. Maybe if that's not too much trouble, to have that for us before this comes back at council.
We can provide that. Yes.
And Mayor, I'd be happy to move that as an amendment to this before we conclude. If you think that's appropriate or if direction from staff is sufficient, I'm happy.
Okay, we'll hold X. There are some speakers. I see Councillor Sluss is asking to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm taking that
Thank you,
from
Mayor.
that I'm up.
Commissioner.
I'm just, are we aware, I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, to Rick, are we aware of other parks or locations of the city that will be applying in 2024?
Through you, Mayor Davis, to the councillor, this location as well as the River Green location that Mayor Davis referred to are the two that I am aware of in addition to what we currently have in place. Woodman would be another one. So those are the three that we're aware of at this point that weren't considered through the 2023 process that could be considered for next year.
Okay. And again, I'm a little confused on timing. So in order for these folks here to get a garden going in 2024, if they go through the normal course of application and apply on April 1st, and I hear from staff that it takes about 6 weeks to put in a water service, would they still be in time for a 2024 growing season?
Through the chair, yes, in that the initial year and maybe several years, we don't typically rush to install a water supply until there's a track record of success at that location. So we would service through trucking water for the first season, and we're still doing that at several locations. That way, we're not investing in a water service that doesn't have the community garden doesn't have the resiliency to take advantage of before that is. So we definitely could approve or receive an application before April 1st of 2024, approve it by the end of April 2024, have the garden in place for the growing season in 2024 without the water service, and bring that online partway through the year or the following year, depending on timing and demand.
Okay. And typically, what does your budget allow for, Rick? Like 1 new one, 2 new ones, 5 new ones?
Typically, it would be fairly even because we put some stay, some go. So the budget for the community garden was enhanced for the year of the garden last year, but it's been fairly static for the last several years.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
I believe Councillor Van Tilburg, you've already spoken to this, but previous to you raising your hand, actually Councillor Samuel raised her hand. So you're next.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add that it's my understanding that as soon as Downtown Central Neighborhood Association was informed of the process of submitting the application, they did do so. So we didn't have that information in time for the deadline. So everyone was aware before this resolution came forward that that was the process, but that the application was being submitted. And I just want to really just reiterate how important this garden is to this neighborhood, regardless of what we come up with tonight, but they need to have the 2024 growing season. So whatever we do here tonight, we need to be able to make sure that that's something that happens. Thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that we want to get there. I'm not that concerned how we get there, but I want to get there. I want to have the water. I think this came to us in this fashion. I'm also aware of water being trucked. That I didn't realize that we did that in stages, and that's fine too. But I think what we want to do is like what comes cheaper at the end of the day. We've always had the goal to run these gardens by the community on a shoestring budget with just the public land being accessible. That's always been the goal. So we know we can run the garden. We know the people will be there. They've been there in the past. And I'm very, very certain that Equal Grounds will go and say, yeah, you've got champions, you've got people, and you've got the need, and it's good. So how we wish to handle this, I'm comfortable with it this way. I'm comfortable if you want to hold something back. But at the end of the day, what I don't want to do is have us make a decision that I find we're in the chicken and the egg. People saying apply before April 1st, 2024. Well, quite frankly, this is way before April 1st, 2024. They're applying pretty early to us. They'll be going through equal grounds. And so they'll have that information in there before next year. It gives us some time. This is here before us. There's nothing wrong with getting ahead of the curve and ahead of the game. We've brought forward what the community has asked for, needs, and what the city has supplied as public land in the past. And I think that's a great thing. The other thing that was mentioned, I didn't realize that River Green was mentioned, but we had River Green. River Green's been approved in the past, can be approved in the future. It requires the same criteria as every other garden. We had at one time, at the very same time, River Green, Earl Hague, and the school running their gardens, all for people in need in the downtown, everybody feeding their families with these gardens. I helped start these gardens with Cheryl Toski before I was a counselor. And one of the things that we did, we were doing these on private land, and then we looked for and helped devise the framework with Andy Tonkin and a number of other community-minded people and how to work with the city in order to have gardens on public land. So that framework's there. There are changes that counselors and council can make to the needs, but overall it starts on a shoestring budget. And so if you guys say that, okay, we don't want to put in the water pipe or whatever and the meter, well, then you say you don't want to do that, but certainly don't say we don't want to provide the water for a garden. I mean, please don't say that. Whatever way we do it, whether we're gathering or whatever, that's kind of what's been part and parcel to many of these gardens. So you got to have water. So how do we get there? The community would like to see garden, and perhaps their voices will be heard after this meeting, just to make sure that we're all aware. Gardens come, gardens go. And that's why there is a process in place that you heard about the procedure to put in a garden.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To staff, just straight up, if we approve this tonight, can we make it so that the budget comes out of next year's budgets and not out of council priority?
Through you, Mayor Davis. So if council wish to move amendment that this item be pushed to the capital budget review, then we can definitely take that on and make a note that we bring that forward to the capital review.
Do I have a seconder on that amendment? Take your pick.
Well, let's see if anybody else, we'll hold that in reserve because you've raised that possibility of amendment. So is Councillor McCreary. So I would go to Councillor McCreary first, but Councillor Carpenter, you had your hand up to speak a second time.
Speak a second time. The staff, there's money left in the roads and related reserve fund of $2 million. Would that be correct? I just heard that earlier on another $25,000 funding request.
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct.
Mr. Cox, there is a budget for the community gardens. How much is the budget annually?
The operating budget, I believe, is fluctuated between $15,000 and $25,000. I'm not sure off the top of my head what it is at for this year.
Is there capital as well for this?
Not this year, no.
I thought it was moved many years ago that it was $25,000 annually, but you're saying between 15 and 25. So it's been adjusted somehow
That's correct, yes.
through the capital budget process or through the budget process?
Through the operational budget process.
Yes. Okay. And you talked about success at this location. Was there not success at this location before when it was a community garden? Do we not have a history on this site?
That's my understanding. Yes, I was not present to observe it myself, but as Councillor Samuel has articulated, this location was a going concern until the school renovation caused it to be required to be relocated.
So when you mentioned about success at this location before we install a water meter, there's already been proven success at this location in the past. Would that be fair to say?
That would be fair to say.
Okay. So if we were to move this, as was suggested by Councillor Sullivan, refer this to the capital 2024 capital budget, and it gets approved at the capital budget process, Would we be able to then go ahead and install the water meter? Because you would have researched the history and we would have all the lists of the volunteers and so forth, all the criteria would be there?
Through the chair, if the council approved installing the water meter, we would install the meter, whether or not there was a track record of success. We would take that direction from council.
But you would have ability to look at the track record from what's previous, right? You
That's
would know
correct.
that. And that could be part of the process when it comes up at the budget process. That could be part of the discussion when it comes forward at budgets.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And I look forward to the amendment. I think that's appropriate.
Before we take the amendments, I'm going to ask staff a question. It's rather confusing. I think many members of the council, myself included, didn't fully understand how this garden procedure process works. But I'd ask you this, if you hear that there's a group that wants to start a garden perhaps next year in River Green, there's a group that's obviously committed to doing this at the Capital School Park. With all that information, knowing haven't got much money left in that reserve, the council priorities reserve, that this really wouldn't be done next year anyway. So there isn't that pressing need to approve a funding source today or this month. Well, what resolution would you bring to us if council said to you, we're concerned, we want to see gardens in both those locations in 2024. We want to follow appropriate procedure and protocol. We want to make sure we're doing it within the budget, or in the 2024 budget, we allocate more money to make this happen. What would that resolution look like?
So to Mayor Davis, just to speak on that, there is a report that we are going to prepare based on the policy, because there's one member of council that sits on this committee. So we do not have that. As former councillor Antosky that sat on this committee. So right now we don't have a decision maker. And that's something that we have to bring back in regards to the policy itself. In regards to the gardens, community gardens, I relate it back to the splash pads notice of motion, where rather than a particular park and looking at it as one area, we look at it citywide. There's a questions about how many community gardens do we have? Are they appropriate in that location? Are they serviced? Do they have parking, et cetera? I think the appropriate move forward for us to manage this, including with our budgets, is to look at what we have and set out appropriate parks that we could bring to council in a report to say, here are suitable parks for community gardens, here there are not suitable. And if any in the not suitable category, maybe that's what follows the policy, but we do have to update the policy as well. So from my end, as the Commissioner of Public Works and overseeing the parks within the city of Brantford, I would say that we should look at this citywide and understand where appropriate locations are, and then fund that appropriately from our operating budget.
So going into 2024, we'll understand exactly what the process is, which gardens are going forward, which could be available to go forward, what the money will be. If we need more money to allocate, we do that in the 2024 budget. That sounds kind of like a referral to me. Is that what you're suggesting we do with this?
So to you, Mayor Davis, entering into multi-year budgets, I think it's very important to understand what the impacts are year over year. A lot of the documents that we have, visioning documents, strategies, et cetera, this would become one of those. So,
but I don't want to lose this resolution. The intent of putting gardens in it at this location that Councillor Samuels brought forward. So how do we clear up the misconfusion? How do we make sure it keeps going forward? We follow the procedure and we better understand the process, and maybe have a councillor member appointed to the committee. Are you suggesting we do a referral, or how do you suggest we handle this tonight?
to you, Mayor Davis, difficult to enter the debate as staff. I'm
looking for advice, not debate.
My advice would be that we look at this holistically throughout the city and not ad hoc at one location at a time, including how we heard River Green today and others. I think we need to look at this as a complete network and report back to staff report back to council by the end of the year.
Okay, so Councillor McCreary, you were the first to say you wanted to do something, either an amendment or something. So if you're still interested, you get first dibs at it.
Can I speak first and then to it? What do you think? Since you're relaxing everything tonight.
I'm not relaxing everything. You may think I am, but I'm not.
Well,
actually, you've only spoken once. So yes, you're entitled to speak again if you wish, before you put an amendment or whatever else you want to put on the floor.
What an excellent ruling.
Go ahead.
I'm proud of you, Mayor. So, yeah, I've heard what the GM has, sorry, we changed all the titles again, didn't we? We're commissioners now. Sorry, Andy. The commissioner, we used to have commissioners, then we had GMs, now we have commissioners again.
Are you going to stay on topic to what we're discussing tonight, please?
I believe
I'd appreciate it.
his title was cited in the report, so therefore I may speak to his title. But what I'm hearing, I was a bit surprised because I, like a previous speaker, didn't know much about the Crystal Cottage. I'm afraid I don't know a whole lot about community gardens, and I didn't know that about the process, and I didn't know that there was a queue to have water services put in. And I'd really like to be able to support this tonight, but I don't know who's ahead of them in the queue and who's going to be disappointed if they jump the queue and get their water service, and maybe, you know, another Ward 5 park doesn't get theirs. So I think there should be a definite process, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. I hear that, you know, that garden was successful at that location earlier, but you know, there may be others that are more successful in other locations. And as the mayor said, maybe there are other people that want to get in the lineup as well. And I think what the commissioner has indicated is probably a sensible way to proceed. So, Mayor, with your blessing, I will move then that we refer this to staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report to council that would speak to a community gardens process and policy citywide, and make recommendations about things like water services, supply of buildings, and perhaps some changes to the operating budget and the capital budget to fully support what is clearly a cool thing in the community. And, you know, Councillor Samwell has become the advocate for this, and I'd like to be able to have her fully supported in her endeavors to make this a success, and to see this, if I may use a bad pun, blossom and grow.
So you have your motion to refer. Do we have a seconder on that? Councillor Martin. Time and place. Did you want to add in time and place to that as well?
As soon as possible within the confines of the work program of staff involved. And perhaps the commissioner could help me out with a date.
Through Mayor Davis, that sounds like Q4 2023.
Perfect.
Is there any way you can do it before then, given we likely will have budget in Q4?
To Mayor Davis, we have also the splash pads location report to bring back, which is an extensive amount of work. So we can aim for earlier, work with staff if we can get that information earlier. So maybe September, if we can aim for September, we would do that. But I do understand the pressures of the multi-year budget and when we have to submit those budgets. So we'll be working with finance on that and ensure that we get whatever our recommendation will be into those budgets.
Okay, so we have the referral on the floor. Any debate on this? Yes, Councillor Carpenter.
So the time is now, be clear, is September 2023? Is the time? Okay, and the funding source, will that be
Yes,
provided at the same time? Because
that's correct.
We will have the contingency fund replenished probably next month. Thank you.
And I have a question for you. In that same report, will you also address these two requests and how they can be folded in?
Yes, Mayor Davis, we'll have a look at all parks that currently do not have community gardens, but also looking at those that do, and maybe, you know, seeing how close they are to each other and what's ideal for our operations and moving between places. So we will include all parks, I'll say, that do not currently have a community garden.
And certainly these two that we know that there is an interest.
Right, exactly.
Okay, all right. So any further debate? Seeing none, call the question.
The referral on item 7.1 carries and recorded vote of 10-1. Members of the committee voted in favor are as follows: Councillors Sullivan, Sless, McCreary, Carpenter, Samwell, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councillor Van Tilburg.
All right, to move on to 7.2, the Winter and Summer Festival, Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's Winter and Summer Festival, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Sluss. Whereas the city of Brantford delivers popular community events, including Brantford's Canada Day, Scare in the Square, New Year's Eve, and the 2023 Ontario 55+ Summer Games, to name a few. And whereas the city also hosts partners and supports community-led events, including Crew Fest, Brantford Charity Air Show, Santa Claus Parade, Wheels on the Pavement, Brantford Kinsman Red Fest, and the Rotary Classic Run, just to name a few. And whereas the variety of events happening in our community is an opportunity to coordinate a week-long winter festival and summer festival that could include new and existing events. And whereas a winter festival and summer festival would benefit Brantford residents and be a regional tourism attraction. And whereas festivals provide community impact through enhancing pride and building social capital. And whereas a winter festival and summer festival may create additional awareness of local events and provide enhanced marketing and promotional opportunities for events, businesses, and other stakeholders. And whereas the proposed winter festival and summer festival will support council priority number 2, focus on productive and collaborative partnerships, and council priorities number 6, effectively and consistently engage with the community. Now, therefore, it be resolved that staff be directed to explore the feasibility of a winter festival and summer festival that aligns new and existing events and provide a report to council prior to the end of Q4 2023. That includes a general outline and project plan for a proposed winter and summer festival to begin in 2024, estimated costs, venues, resources required, and anticipated social, cultural, and economic development impact if applicable. And if I can speak to this,
go ahead.
I've been a Brantford resident for close to 13 years. I love this city. This is where I plan to stay for the rest of my remaining life. Although there might be some people who might take that a little earlier. But I also lived in a lot of various cities. And what I saw in those, I did a lot of takeaways before I became a councillor. I wanted to become a councillor so I can help all the residents of Ward 2. I also wanted to build and grow a city to its full potential with an emphasis on development. But I also want a city that's going to have something behind it that is going to be allow community involvement and pride and culture. And I think what we want to do, or what I'd like to accomplish with this, is to develop a culture. When I look at cities like Hamilton that are doing the summer concert series that starts this week, Festival of Friends, City of London, where they have a 3-day Rib Festival, Sunfest, Balloon Festival. Look at Ottawa with Winterlude. And in my hometown of Sault Ste. Marie, small town with, that hasn't done a lot over these last years, but they still have a Rotary Fest that happens for 4 days during the week and a Bonsu Winter Carnival that's probably second to none to that happens in Quebec. I think if we took the time and spent and actually use the resources that we have and go back to some of the stuff that we already had been doing, whether it be Frosty Fest, Chili Willy Cook-Off, if we can marry those events and put them into the same week. I've had counselors and people in this come to me and talk about the old Big Four when they used to have a football tournament that happened in the city with all the high schools. Why can't we put a high school hockey tournament and melt it all into the same week? Corporate challenges where businesses are going to challenge other businesses in different events. Polar bear swims in the summer. Can we not marry a Rib Fest, which isn't happening this year, which is kind of disheartening because we couldn't come up with a place and or volunteers. The air show. How do we utilize Harmony Square and turn it into a music festival place for music running from 4 o'clock until 11 o'clock for 4 nights a week? Buskers, all those things can happen. And one of the things that we definitely need to look at is also having some corporate sponsorship coming behind this. Most events like this that happen in other cities usually have some huge corporate sponsors locally and sometimes even nationally, depending on the ride. So I hope I get support for this. I think I'd certainly like to have the experts in that, which is tourism and economic development, really drive this forward. But I think if we put our heads together and really look at something, I think it could be pretty impactful. And then last but not least, certainly get the neighborhood associations involved in planning and organizing various events within their entire areas that will last between the winter and then summertime. So I'd open up to everybody who wants to enter. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. I like the idea. However, the one thing I would like to see on this as well is that this gets shared amongst the different wards in the city and not just be isolated in one particular ward. I think everybody deserves to have an opportunity to host something like this. Thanks.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
I think this is a very timely resolution. And the reason is that our city has always been doing things and community groups have always been doing things. And I think our marketing and the work of the downtown BIA with their marketing on events that are happening have always been very effective. But we all know we had a bit of a breakdown a year or two ago that lasted a while. And so a lot of the things that people were used to doing and the connections, some things have broken down. And we found coming out of COVID that for whatever reason that I can't quite put my finger on, the volunteerism has kind of vaporized. It's been very difficult for groups to get the people to put together the events that they want to do. So I think with this should be some sort of outreach and marketing or whatever. In other words, when we boost this and what we're doing and how we're doing it, how we can reach out to the community to bring them back into doing what they do. And with that, I have a question. How were we holding and marketing all these events that were happening in the Brantford in the past, both in the winter and the summer? All the events have been mentioned. And so it looks like we're just trying to label them and quantify them into a specific theme. How were we doing that in past years?
Through the chair, I'll take a crack at that. Maria Vasaki, Director of Communications, Community Engagement and Customer Service. Good question, Councillor Van Tilburg. In the past, we would market and work very closely with our friends in tourism and economic development to talk about events that are happening seasonally. And if there were events that happened in conjunction with each other in close proximity to each other, we would market them together and suggest to residents or to visitors coming from outside of our boundaries to take advantage of promotional bundles. We've done partnerships with hotels, for example, where if there's a couple of festivals going on the same weekend, then they get a discount to stay at that hotel. So there is some precedent for us in thinking about these things in conjunction with each other and marketing events as with some longevity. This stay in the city for 3 or 4 days so that you can take advantage of more than just one event. We've also, frankly, worked very closely with our neighboring municipalities. We have really good relationships, especially on the tourism side, with Six Nations of the Grand River, as well as the county. And there are assets that exist in those neighboring towns that don't exist in Brantford and vice versa. So we've done some bundle packaging and marketing with them as well. So like I said, there is some precedent.
I thought so. So this is awesome. This is great timing, and I'm going to be very happy to support this resolution.
Next, Councillor Sicoli.
Councillor Caputo, bravo with this one. We finally have the Bulldogs that we're going to rally behind, and now it's time for us to have our signature event or festival that we can really rally behind and bring out all of Brantford and all of the community together and just celebrate and have a good time. And I'm just going to put this out in the universe to all the staff that's listening. Busker Fest, I have been dying to go to one, and I would not be opposed to having that here. So good job bringing this forward. I'm excited to see what comes back, and don't forget the buskers. Okay, bye.
Councillor Schluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I was pleased to second this, and I certainly congratulate my board mate. We've discussed it, but it was definitely his idea, and he's driving this. To me, it's an opportunity to, I think, to build on community spirit and community pride, and to be doing things in the community that we're proud of, and that I think just making the city something that we all want it to be, and something that we're, as I said, really proud to live here. I think with the cost of living and the cost of traveling, there's a lot of folks looking for things to do, their staycation, staying at home, but having a good time and celebrating things. And it brings to mind to me back in the mid 80s, in the early 90s, we had a celebration of the river, and it was called Riverfest. And it was a huge event. It filled, I believe it was in Cockshut Park and also at Lions Park at some point. And it was packed, and people were excited, and there was things going on. And I think there was a carnival attached to it. There was just a whole lot happening. And it was really a celebration of the river, something that we tend to underutilize and not really shine a light on the way we should. So it's again, just planting seeds. Busker Fest is a good idea. And I think Riverfest is also an excellent idea that to bring something back, what's new was old and what's old is new again. So I think it's something to certainly look at, and I would hope staff would do a lot of work on this to get it to bring it to the point to fruition where we've got something that everybody's proud to be a part of. So again, kudos to my ward mate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you very much, and kudos to Councilor Caputo. That almost rhymes. For bringing this forward. We celebrate things like the air show because it's a community event that we take ownership of. We buy into that, but we don't necessarily operate it, and we don't operate a lot of the things that go on. We provide support, we provide marketing, thanks to Maria's folks, for third-party events. But I think where we're headed with this is to have a couple of events of a big nature in this city that are going to be operated by City of Brantford and funded by local business and taxpayers. And I see a good future in this. I think to a couple of examples, there was a time in this Fairland when the Highland Games ran every year. I think there was a gentleman named Andy McDonald that owned that event for probably 20 years. And things change, and it petered out and it's lost. And Councilor Carpenter and I will have to wear our plaid tartan ties when this comes to council as a reminder that perhaps we want to celebrate something like that. And I also lived in a place in a land far away that had a little event called the Greatest Outdoor Show on Earth. And hearing some discussion tonight about getting communities involved, clearly in Calgary, it's a big event, but it spawns a lot of spin-offs, Stampede breakfasts, and community things that neighborhood associations and businesses do. And I see a future for us in terms of having that kind of broad pop-up kind of thing that could accompany a big deal event in this city in the summer and the winter time. And you look at things that go on in other communities, and we were out on the weekend and there was an event going on in a small town, and everybody in the town seized the opportunity to put a table out front and have a yard sale. And it was, that's the kind of thing that adds life to a community. And it's the supplementary things, the ancillary things are just as important as the big show, as they say. There's also it's opportune because come fall, I believe we're going to be receiving our report with respect to the municipal accommodation tax initiative that's coming forward. And I think that might be in September. And I'm getting a thumbs up from the boss back there. So that's an opportunity for us to have some additional funds that were required to reinvest in tourism and third-party organizations. And there may, we may look at the creation of a third-party organization that could be responsible for some of this. We might also want to consider, we hear, and Councillor Sullivan, I think, referenced spreading things out in the municipality. We may want to consider a venue that we haven't had, perhaps something in the way of a fairground, perhaps in, a big spot where we might have 54 vacant acres, or, north of a certain portion of town. So there's endless possibilities here. And, you know, this is kind of day one for us, and it's going to be very exciting to see where this goes. And I hope everybody will support the resolution, and I hope this will generate some real community interest and some blue skying and suggestions from the community about what they'd like to see us doing with, with their investment. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's deja vu. I mean, I don't know any other city except for Brantford. This is where I grew up. This is where I've been. And we've had lots of festivals. I was on Riverfest for many years back in the day when we were celebrating the river. It was a wonderful festival. And Ribfest and the Highland Games, I served with Annie McDonald on the Public Utilities Commission actually when the Highland Games were in town. So I've been around for a while. We do a lot of events. We just had the Rotary Classic Run this weekend. But there's a lot of community events happening. And we created the SEEK committee, and we created a process for council to make sure things are proper. But there's a large expense to anybody putting on a community event. It's very expensive. That's one thing we got to address. Second thing is, as Councilor Van Tilburg said, since COVID, it's changed everything. The number of volunteers are just not there for most organizations, whether it be Ribfest because we couldn't find a location or they couldn't get volunteers, whatever the reason being. Community events come and they go. Neighbor associations, in fact, are already doing the music in the park all summer long. Victoria Park will have music in it from the neighbor association. So there are lots of things going on. So I think Councilor Caputo I agree with him 100%. If we could pull these things together, and if council could actually show support for these organizations by reducing the costs. I'm in favor of anything that's going to create pride and positivity in our community. That's why I supported the Bulldogs. That's somebody to be proud of. I'd like us to support the Red Sox in the same way because that's our major baseball team. We should be supporting what makes our community proud. We call ourselves a tournament capital, and we've yet to provide support for the tournament capital for those folks and keeping kids busy and that activity. So it encompasses a lot of things, not just one or two festivals, but a way we should look at all of the things we do and what does it cost and what is the hindrance in making these events come forward. And can we combine some of them into a larger event? I think that's very, very doable. But we have to find a way. The cost is rather prohibitive for a lot of groups to do events. There's insurance, there's lots of reasons why, but there is ability for the city to be able to pull that together, as Councilor Caputo was suggesting, to make this all happen. So it's not happening now, not as it's a matter because it's costly and no one is arranging it. And if we lead the group here and the community volunteers to do this, we could probably have a number of good community events in a way that we, had envisioned. Even the Harmony Square, what is supposed to be as a public square, should have been events there every weekend. But we need to find a way to facilitate that and be a partner in that so that the costs aren't all borne by all the individuals trying to raise the funds, for example. A lot of charitable groups would be happy to get involved. We could probably get more use of the fewer volunteers if we combine these things together. So you'll always get my support if it's anything that's going to provide pride for our community and positivity for our community, especially what we've been through.
Councilor Caputo.
Well, in speaking and hearing Councillor Sullivan, the intent is I would love to be able to utilize the entire city from Lions Park to Woodman Park to downtown Harmony Square. Everywhere needs to be involved. Gretzky Center, the fields at Gretzky Center in the summertime when they aren't used, different events that can happen. When it comes to the thought process of how to raise money or how do we fund these things, we utilize, in my opinion, we utilize both the Rotary groups, the Wednesday group as well as the Friday group, Kinsman, Kiwanis, and probably the one that I would look at the most is probably Crew Fest. They're used to having events such as this. They have running things that would do that way. So between those groups and trying to get volunteers from their end, and the fact that it would be fundraising events for them and major fundraising events for them, whether it be, when we look at Ribfest should generate revenue, music in the park, if it's going to be a licensed event down in that area, it's going to generate revenue, however it's going to work. And I think the biggest thing too, as well, is to look at the opportunity for us to be able to get as many corporate sponsorships as possible. And I think that's probably the biggest key. And then get some of those businesses involved as well. And that's where I said, I think where the corporate challenges come out to play. So with that being said, the other thing I wanted to touch on, you guys talked about wearing plaid suits. I think it's pretty funky. As I was looking at the end of the table, we got Mr. Carlson over there. We got Herb Tarlick over there. We got Johnny Fever over there, and we got Andy over there. So we could turn this into a Herb Tarlick party. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Clerk, take the vote, please.
Item 7.2 carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Sullivan, Sless, McCreary, Carpenter, Samwell, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, Councilor McCreary, I've got to step away for a few minutes. Do you mind, you're next in line to take over chairing, and can you take 7.3, please?
Oh, no, that sudden notice doesn't bother me at all. Thank you, Mayor.
I knew you'd be perfectly able to respond
Yes.
to it.
So we're on 7.3. Thank you, Mayor. Hurry back. 7.3 resolution, Councilor Carpenter, that's your baby. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Acting Mayor McCreary. And it's moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Linda Hunt. Whereas the intersection of Rowanwood Ave and Cumberland Street currently has a two-way stop control. And whereas the intersection sight lines are difficult to see past the corner safely, and whereas the area residents are concerned about a possible serious accident at this intersection, and whereas short-cutting traffic has increased in the last 2 years with the completion of the Gray Street extension development, and whereas the intersection has become more dangerous to cross, and whereas there is a neighborhood park just off Rowanwood Avenue where the kids access this intersection. Now therefore be resolved that staff be directed to plan and always stop at this intersection. And this came forward to Councillor Hunt and I from constituents on the cul-de-sac and the nearest block affecting it, both blocks actually. Councillor Hunt and I have visited the site. It's difficult. It's not a site that you can make safe by simply saying remove parking, and that can be done. It's the way the driveways of the houses are situated that you wouldn't be able to make it safe to see up the street past the vehicles in the first place. So the only way to make this go safe as far as we're concerned is a four-way stop. And I hope council will support the ward counters as we've done earlier.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. And Councillor Hunt, if I recall, is the seconder. Yes, thank you. Discussion on this item, folks. We have Councillor Martin up first, then Councillor Hunt. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Question through the staff first. Was there a warrant study done for this location?
Through the chair, yes, there was a warrant study done, but it did not warrant a stop sign.
Okay, thank you. And with that information, I'd like to read an excerpt from an email that I received from staff. It says, when always stop control is installed at unwarranted locations, poor stop compliance is common. So when you have poor stop compliance, we've obviously reached the point of diminishing returns. We're putting these in for safety for children, but we teach children to cross at intersections. Well, if they think it's safe to cross because there's a stop sign and somebody's not complying with it, we've now made it more dangerous. So it's actually made the matter worse instead of better. The previous council passed a resolution declaring a climate emergency. Adding stop signs increases greenhouse gases because cars have to slow down, hopefully at least. Some will stop, and that requires more greenhouse gas to get going again. Some people think stop signs are traffic control. They're not. When people are forced to stop unnecessarily, they see how fast they can get back up to speed to make up for the lost time. It actually makes things worse instead of better. So when you look at the Google Earth of this intersection, the streets are dead straight. There's no sightline issues in that respect. The sightline issues that you can see on Google Earth is someone has plantings on the boulevard. So there's bushes on the boulevard that can be addressed with property standards because that's not allowed. And so that can be cleaned up to open up the sight lines so that you can see down the street and improve the sight lines and improve safety in that respect. So because we're at the point of diminishing returns, any more stop signs we put in that aren't warranted leads to lack of compliance and makes matters worse instead of better. So I'm hoping that we can turn this down and get off this kick of installing four-way stops everywhere, because it's just not working. Thank you.
Counselor, thank you. And Counselor Hunt, you have the floor. Go ahead, please.
So I visited with Counselor Carpenter in my van. I will tell you, as a vehicle, and it's not bushes, that I had to be virtually in the intersection before I can see past the vehicles parked in the driveway on Rowanwood Ave. So, or sorry, on Cumberland. So Rowanwood, you are out in the intersection, and that's me in a vehicle. So imagine a child in a bicycle that has to get out into the middle of the intersection before he can see if there's a car coming down the street and there is no stop sign. So we talk a lot about supporting the ward councillors. We're on the ground, and in this case, both Councillor Carpenter and I went out there and walked to the intersection. I drove from that intersection with the constituent that called me about his concern. And his concern is valid. He himself has a 9-year-old son, and once he goes through the intersection, it's 1 block to the park. So there are real valid safety concerns. And I certainly would hate to see us turn down a four-way stop and have a serious incident, which we've alluded to in the Councillor Carpenter's alluded to in the resolution, that place is an accident waiting to happen.
Well said, Counselor, and thank you. Counselor Sokola, you have the floor. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. I know in my conversations with staff over the last 2 years or so that sometimes when we implement what we intend to be a traffic calming measure, it has unintended consequences on other streets, or, you know, like a car will try to avoid this and then they'll zip down another street. Has any consideration been given to that? Has there been a neighborhood meeting? Has this neighborhood been looked at holistically, or is this, we're just sort of putting a four-way stop here? Sorry to make you walk all the way up, Dave.
Good evening, through the chair, David Ferguson, manager of traffic services. No, we have not done a neighborhood study or review with the neighborhoods and residents.
Has anything been reviewed in this neighborhood in the last 5 years or so? Or is it worth looking at holistically?
Through the chair, I mean, our position is always that we would prefer to look at things holistically and involve the residents. As you know, with our neighborhood reviews, they've gone quite well. So that would always be our preference.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor, thank you. Counselor Van Tilburg, go ahead, please.
If I could get a list of stop signs that were implemented by council that were unwarranted or had no warrant study at all in the last 4 years, I would appreciate that. I'm sure we've done a couple. Comments made earlier by other councillors are actually quite valid. Those things do happen. And there is a bit of a time frame that they generally come up more than others, which happens to be at election period. Seems to be very, very popular then. And there's no time for warrant studies. So if we could get a list of what's been done. So this isn't unusual. Councillors going out and meeting with their constituents and trying to address the concerns. What I would like to see, I have a referral if there's no other speakers.
Just hold on to that, Counselor. Are there any other speakers? Mayor Davis, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. So I was out of the room when Councillor Martin was speaking, but I heard the tail end of what he was talking about. And I tend to agree with him that, you know, we do have, and I appreciate what the ward councillors are doing. We've kind of developed this practice of, if the ward councillors through interaction with a neighborhood determines that there is a need to have a four-way stop, or the neighbors want it, residents want it. And we've developed this this protocol of, well, then you just bring it forward and we don't even have staff do a warrant study. And I don't fault the councillors for doing that. That precedent has developed over time. But I got to tell you, going through the city, throughout the whole entire city, from July through to October, the one thing that I saw over and over and over again was how we have so many four-way stops in the city that we've created this kind of disrespect for four-way stops, and they really become yield signs. And I saw a couple of dangerous situations where pedestrians were at a four-way stop expecting the traffic to stop, and it didn't, because it's almost like four-way stops have become yield signs. It's really unfortunate. I think we as a council and past councils have created the situation where we've had too many four-way stops in place. There's so many the police can't possibly enforce them. There's been a really good trend in the last 3-4 years through staff doing these kind of detailed neighborhood studies and looking at all the traffic calming measures other than four-way stops that can be very effective. And so I think I've decided that from this point forward, I would prefer not, as an individual member of council, not to approve four-way stops as a matter of policy for myself, unless it's gone through staff. And we've had everything looked at, both a warrant study, and we've had other traffic calming measures considered. I think we've come to rely too much as a default on four-way stops, and it's coming back now, I think, to haunt us, creating unsafe situations, a traffic enforcement tool that is now subject to a lot of disrespect, frankly, and because it's just too numerous. So I agree with Councillor Martin, at least the part that I heard. Not to say that traffic control is not warranted here, but I think probably it would behove us to really check it out if there are other measures that can make this intersection safer than it is now. Short of four-way stops.
Mayor, thank you. Councillor Sullivan, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. You're doing a fine job. I have one concern with this particular stop is that there's no sidewalks on any of the adjacent streets, which is just adding to the issue of the traffic flow because you already have pedestrians walking on the roads. So I think we need to take that into consideration when we're pondering this.
Councillor, thank you. I'm going to hang on to that for just 1 second because I want to speak. Are there any other speakers, first timers? Let me just speak then. So Cumberland and Rowanwood, it's one of those typical weird Brantford streets. Cumberland's bisected by a park, and to top it off, it makes a south turn and turns into Hamilton, I believe. But I've been on that street and I can appreciate why the ward councillors want to do this, and I think it makes perfect sense. And I'm going to be fully supportive. You know, Councillor Martin and I've had the experience of having children hurt and then coming to the conclusion that we need to take action, right? And we did it with a stop sign. We're going to be making further improvements on Ash Grove, and I'm going to support this tonight, and I won't support a referral or a deferral or any sort of an URL. Perhaps the stop sign installed, then perhaps there's other traffic measures that could be considered, but I think that's a primary first step, and I commend the ward councillors. And I would remind those that don't want to support the ward councillors tonight that there may come a point in time when you'd be looking for the ward councillors to support you. Councillor Carpenter, second time.
Yes, I looked around for how to write a resolution to resolve this problem with my ward mate. I know Council Chair is laughing because this is actually a Ward 3 resolution that was supported by both Ward 3 councillors of the day on, I think it was on Forsyth. And I just substituted some of the names and added where the park was and made some changes to it. And that's so to suggest that, this ad hockery isn't appropriate. Well, it was already all right when it was in Ward 3. I don't know why it's not all right in Ward 4. I have some concerns. I've been following the process here for some time. And what I've learned very clearly is that following the process doesn't really get you anywhere. I put in a request for speed bumps on Garden Ave 2019. But I watched members of council that sit around this table bring forward resolutions for speed bumps. One we just approved tonight with extra funding for Ward 3. And we've seen speed bumps done a great job on Oak Hill Drive. That was done by a resolution that went through different in the process. Great job, actually. So what I'm finding out is that the council's actually got to move the resolution to get it done. If I want it done in a timely manner, and I want this done in a timely manner. So I'd ask all of you to support the ward councilors and the ward residents in providing a stop sign at this location. Thank you.
Counselor, thank you. And over to you, Counselor Caputo.
Thank you, Acting Chair. I want to support this tonight because I do want to be able to look at every opportunity that we can to make safe opportunities. In listening and hearing about 4-way stops, I think one of the areas we might have to look at is revisiting our 4-way stops throughout the city and maybe taking some of them out that don't need to be 4-way stops. I can give you one perfect example just down Balmoral. There's a 4-way stop, 2 4-way stops within, or 3-way stops between 30 feet of each other. And I think we need to look at those and maybe remove some and then actually put them at spots where we do realize that there are some real concerns. Just had to put that in there, and you're doing a great job, even though I'm supposed to be acting mayor of the month, but I'm just an actor anyway, so.
Talk is cheap, Counselor. Talk is cheap. Counselor Sicoli, over to you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. I've brought quite a few traffic calming resolutions myself, and I see Dave laughing over there because he knows. And, those come as a result of immense neighborhood consultation with the neighborhood associations. And then we have some incredibly talented staff here that Dave Ferguson, you do such good work and you put together this great big holistic plan. And then, we'll identify an area that's of particular concern. And that's sort of what gets plucked out of a much larger plan and brought here to council. So I just want to shout you out. You are such a valuable resource to the community and to traffic calming here in the community and keeping everyone safe. So I'm going to be supporting this tonight because I think keeping the neighborhood safe is very important. It's something that I'm passionate about. So shout out to Councillor Carpenter and Hunt for bringing this forward. But I will, I want to say that we do have some very talented staff that have some really great ideas that are outside of the box of just a 4-way stop or just a stop sign. And there's so many different ways that we can calm our traffic and keep people safe. It's really changed, and it's I would just encourage everyone to reach out to Dave if you have these concerns in your ward, because he's really helped me, and thank you so much.
Counselor, thank you. Counselor Van Tilburg, did you want to move something or should we go to the vote?
No, I still wish to move something, that this gets referred to Vision Zero and that this area is holistically reviewed for the best solution in traffic calming and for that street. And you can decide whether it was supported or not.
Did the clerk catch that? Thank you. Seconded by the mayor. And I'll ask Chris if you'd go to the vote. Oh, sorry, Counselor.
The motion is to refer this to have this reviewed. This whole area was reviewed, and it was reviewed on traffic patterns, not necessarily on the sight lines. This is a sight line issue, and that's why I'd encourage you to not support deferring this. In fact, vote to put it in place, because the area was reviewed, but based upon traffic flow, not necessarily sight lines. And this is a sight line issue.
Counselor, thank you. Now we'll go to the vote, please.
The referral for item 7.3 lost on a recorded vote of 4-7. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Mayor Davis, Councillor Sicoli, Councillor Martin, Councillor Van Tilburg. Members opposed: Councillors Samuel, Carpenter, Hunt, McCreary, Sluss, Caputo, and Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And now to the vote on the motion.
Item 7.3 carries on a recorded vote of 9-2. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Sokoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, McCreary, Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Samwell. Members opposed, Councillors Martin and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Chris. And back to you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCreary, for taking care of that while I stepped out for a minute. So we'll move into the last resolution, item 7.4, 2023 Earl Haig Summer Celebration. Councillor Samwell.
So moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Van Tilburg. Whereas Earl Haig Family Fun Park provides a wide range of amenities and activities, including children's day camps, swimming, batting cages, mini putt, splash pad, and picnic facilities. And whereas the Earl Haig Family Fun Park is enjoyed by thousands of children and families each summer. And whereas the civic swimming pool opened in July 1923 on the site that is now known as Earl Haig Family Fun Park. And whereas after opening the civic swimming pool, the Great War Veterans Association was granted permission to run concessions and amusements. And whereas in 1929, the facility was renamed the Earl Haig Pool. And whereas in 2023 represents the 100th anniversary of opening the 100th anniversary of opening of the civic swimming pool on site that is now known as Earl Haig Family Fun Park, whereas an Earl Haig summer celebration is an opportunity to raise awareness of the history, activities, and amenities of Earl Haig Family Fun Park. Now, therefore, it be resolved that staff be directed to develop a community engagement campaign to share pictures and memories that highlight the history of Earl Haig Family Fun Park, that staff be directed to coordinate a community event with entertainment attractions during the summer of 2023 at Earl Haig Family Fun Park, and that staff be directed to waive fees at Earl Haig Family Fun Park for one day during the summer 2023 as part of the Earl Haig celebration, and that staff be directed to fund the Earl Haig Summer Celebration to a maximum of $15,000 from council priorities to cover the cost of lost revenue, a community engagement campaign, and activities that support Earl Haig Summer Celebration. And just to add to that, Earl Haig has always been a part of the fabric of our community, and citizens of all ages hold their memories of their visits to Earl Haig close to their heart. So this summer, let's celebrate and reminisce about 100 years of this very special place. Thank you.
Councillor Scully.
Yes, thank you. And through the mayor, I have had a bit of it's been challenging to reconcile this as I was reading through it over the weekend. So the Civic Center pool was open in 1923, but that no longer exists. And the Earl Haig name wasn't established until 1929. So one might suggest it might be more appropriate to celebrate this in 2029. I think we're kind of grasping at straws to have the celebration of this year, and it may be more appropriately celebrated in 2029. So I do have an amendment that I'd like to bring forward when you think it's appropriate, Mr. Chair.
First, we'll see if there are any other speakers. Councillor Hunt, then Councillor Van Tilburg.
So I would certainly support this. We have spent more than $15,000 to celebrate 10-year anniversaries, 25-year anniversaries. And so $15,000 to celebrate the fact that the city of Brantford has had a pool, call it whatever name you want, at that location for 100 years. Certainly seems like a very reasonable sum of money, and also celebrates the fact that that is a venue that is enjoyed by a great number of our residents and visitors throughout the summer. So I would be fully supportive of it based on the fact that this council, even though I've only been sitting here for 6 months, has certainly funded other celebrations that are not 100 years in the making.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
You know, this is supposed to be a very fun event for the 100th year of Earl Haig. Certainly celebrating 100 years versus 10 years of what was essentially a reconditioning of a building for a lot more money. This is actually a pretty good thing for us to celebrate. with all the
Point of
community.
order, Mayor, point of order.
I've stated clear facts.
Hang on, someone's entitled to state a point of order.
I've stated clear facts.
Yep. So, point of order.
If
What
I
is it?
may, categorizing the rebuild of our primary sports facility in this city is certainly a much greater achievement than reconditioning, I think was the word. What we did was we rebuilt on that site.
What is the point of order? Are you saying it's a point of privilege or what is it?
I'm offering a correction to a misstatement.
All right, you can do that when you debate it. I don't see there's anything in what Councillor Van Tilburg said that would call for me to direct him on a point of order. I appreciate your point, not taken. Continue, Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, and as one that celebrated the celebration for Gretzky, I'm sure that we all know that took on a name after its inception. And when I hear about what the area of Earl Haig was called prior and what it was, as a member of the 56th Field Regiment, as a member with long histories of military service, and the fact that these names were taken on at a time when that was the community, and that was the way they respected the service of the people of the community and what they would take on and how they would generate revenues. I mean, that is the heart and soul of Eagle Place. It's the heart and soul of our community. And it wasn't my brainiacness, and I don't know if it was Mandy's brainiacness that said, hey, it's 100 year. It's people that know, that follow, that live in this area. And they also know the reasons why we created the water parks in that area. And that was to keep children from going into the river and drowning. That was behind a lot of that. And, you know, so like I said, this is a celebratory thing. I think it's a good thing. I think we can all recognize that it's been 100 years within the possession of the city structure. The community has never seen it change. It's always been there over that period of time, things change. But I mean, we know what Earl Haig is. So this is the time. I think we all recognize that. I wish we were throwing more money at this, but what I'm told is that the resources that we have available in order to handle the number of people that would be involved, this is what's on offer. And I think that we recognizing 100 years for the community, for the people that were involved in this, it is 100th year. I think that's just the honorable and right thing to do. And there is absolutely no need to put it off for more years.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been stated that there's been a pool there for 100 years, but that's not correct. Because there was a time between when the original pool was removed and the water park was built. I'm not sure how many years, but there were a number of years there where there was no water feature at Earl Haig. So it hasn't been 100 years of a water feature there, either pool or the water park that's there now. And Councillor Coley raises a valid point that it hasn't been called Earl Haig for 100 years. So I'm not sure that it's appropriate to celebrate 100 years of something that's been there and then gone and then something else put in its place. It's hardly the same thing. I mean, if we want to talk about the length of the Gretzky Center, we can go back to when it was called North Park Arena. So it's been there far more than 10 years. The idea of the 10 years is because of the rebuild, and it's also to install a art feature that celebrates the life of Walter Gretzky, our one and only Lord Mayor, as far as I know. I don't think we've had one before, and we certainly haven't had one since. So to do a proper celebration of our Lord Mayor, I think is a far more significant and important milestone to deal with. And that's a lot of the reason for the 10-year anniversary is to incorporate the celebration of Walter Gretzky. and all he's done for this community. Put Brantford in the center of the universe. And so I'll be voting against this because it hasn't been Earl Hague for 100 years. There hasn't been a water feature there for 100 years. There was one there for a while and then it disappeared and then something else was put in its place. So I think we're a little premature with this, and I'll support Councillor Sokoli's resolution to defer this.
Councillor Carpenter.
I think this will fail 6-5 and there'll be an amendment that will pass 6-5. You know, the pool's been, there's been a facility there at the beginning at least 100 years ago. That's when it started. I'm trying to understand what's going on here. Well, we talk about some positive resolution that Councilor Caputa puts forward about pride in the community and talking about how we could be proud about our facilities. Anybody that's been here has been a long time. It's been to Earl Hague Pool when it was a large pool, Olympic-sized pool. And yeah, there was a period when it wasn't there because they were trying to figure out what to do with they had to tear the old pool out to build a new one. You know, the Woodman pool hasn't been there this year either for the last 2 years, but it'll be there next year. That doesn't mean it wasn't there at one point. The pool was there. And everybody in the community used that pool. It was the Olympic-sized pool. If you support a resolution to move it off to 2029, my fear is that it won't be there. There'll be nothing there in 2029. We've already heard lots of debate about why we can't have something there. The greenhouse couldn't be there. Because now there seems to be some idea that this is going to become some entertainment district. I'm not privy to that information, but I've heard all those comments around. Maybe the pool won't be there in 2029. I suspect it will not be. So this is something positive for the community. And we talked about history tonight with the museum. This is about people sharing their history, their experience, and past experience involved with this pool. Why would we not support something this positive for a community? Why would we defer anything that gives us the ability to celebrate our past and what the community has done here? Because it was empty for a couple of years, because they were building the new pool. They had it to a private contractor, and we didn't reduce the tax load as low as we could have for something that was a parks benefit for the city. And then we had to take it back from them, and then we had to fix all the errors that the private sector developer did when we took it over. A lot of money was spent on the lazy river and the things that are there now. I would have preferred the Olympic-sized swimming pool go back in, but that's not what happened. So rather than look at those things, why aren't we looking at the positive, people's memories? Because if it's not going to be here in 2029, which I suspect it's not, let's do it now. And let's preserve those memories so people can be proud of what happened, in the history of Earl Hague and the original pool. So the first time a pool was here was in 1923. That's the first time there was something in the ground. Whether the park was called what it was called and when the park was named Earl Hague is not relevant. What's relevant here is that the pool was there in 1923. And now it's known as Earl Hague Valley Fun Park. So why can't we celebrate the fact that we had this Olympic-sized swimming pool? One of the few municipalities that ever did. We should be celebrating that. It's a good thing that we did that. And it would be a good thing to celebrate. Good for the community. Positive reinforcement, pride in the community. Why not? Why not? Is there something wrong with that location? Is there something wrong with providing pride to the community? I just don't get it. I don't understand why all the negativity towards this. I think this is positive. And why don't we vote in a positive way to allow the people of Eagle Place to be proud if it's always been there? It's not just for Eagle Place, just like the Gretzky Center is not just for Ward 3. It's for the whole community. And it's just like the sports park at Shelters Lane is for the whole community. We'll be proud of that someday too. So why would we not respect Council Samuel's resolution here and support the neighborhood, Eagle Place, and the community on what's been a positive event for the city of Brantford? I'm going to vote in favor, but I think it's going to fail.
Councillor Scully.
Yes, I love Earl Hague's. I spent a great deal of time there, many, many hours. I had my grade 8 school trip there. This is no disrespect to Earl Hague, Earl Hague's Family Fun Park, but our council priorities account is at basically zero. And we're just making up an anniversary here. It's not the 100th anniversary. the earth that the city of Brantford lives on has been here for millions of years. We don't celebrate the millions of years before the city of Brantford was founded. We celebrate from the time the city of Brantford became the city of Brantford. So this is no disrespect to anybody who put some hard work into this. This is strictly, it just didn't add up in my head. And I do think that this would be more appropriately celebrated in the year 2029. So I do have an amendment, and it will be seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Sullivan, that basically any mention to 2023 in the now therefore be it resolved be switched to the year 2029. So I believe that's B, that we switch summer 2023 to 2029, and C, that we switch summer 2023 to summer 2029. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Sullivan to the amendment. Councillor McCurry, you raised your hand.
Actually, Mayor, I raised my hand to speak to the main motion prior to the amendment being introduced. So I'd like to do that now.
Right, go ahead.
Thank you. So I wonder if staff might actually be able to tell us what the grand opening date for the Earl Haig Family Fun Park was. And I would accept within a decade if we don't know exactly.
Through the chair, Aaron Wallace, I'm Director of Community Strategies and Family Supports, and I apologize to committee, I don't know.
Would you say it was before 2003?
I think it is. Counselor, could you repeat the question?
Probably not verbatim, Mr. Cox, but I can take a stab at it. Do we know when the current facility on that site was finished and opened?
I think your guesstimate is much closer than 1923 or 1929.
I would guess that the age of that place might be about 40 years, and I don't know if anybody else would know any better. And it is a paid facility, is that correct?
Through the chair, you pay to enter as a paying customer to use Earl Haig. Yes.
So it doesn't really satisfy the fear of the community about children drowning. It would only be children that can't afford the admission price that might be at risk in the river. I do want to say, Mayor, in response to a comment earlier, and since it was raised, I grow tiresome of the attacks that are made on the name of the Gretzky family, which is affixed to our structure in beautiful Ward 3. I grow tired of the criticism of probably one of the finest facilities in this province. And I would add that, you know, Walter has left us, Wayne lives in another community, but there are members of the family that live here. And quite frankly, I'm embarrassed that in this day and age, we still talk ill of anything with that name on it, Mayor. And I hope you'll bear that in mind when we hear future comments on this. I'm not going to support this tonight. I'd like to, you know what, I don't mind the operative clauses. I got no problem with having a festival down there and giving $15,000 in free admissions for a day. I got no problem with that at all. But I just think there's a great deal of misinformation in the whereas, the whole listing of the history of this place. You know, I guess if I'm not going to support it tonight, if this comes back to us at council day, stripped out of all that stuff, just asking for $15,000 to put on a really cool event, I'm good with that. But quite frankly, I can't support anything that I don't think is historically accurate, and that the first 10 lines of this just aren't historically accurate. So I won't support I might support the deferral, I might support the referral, but I won't support the resolution as it stands.
So to the amendment. Any other debate? Seeing none?
What
Sorry.
exactly is this amendment saying?
Yeah, that's a good point. I was just wondering that myself. Got so confusing and it's getting late. So can we have that, please, Mr. Clerk? So moved by Councillor Scoli, second by Councillor Sullivan, the year 2023 be replaced with 2029 clause B and C. That's pretty straightforward. And I'll say this, that I'm okay with the amendment. I'm usually driven by logic. And, I look at this as if it's a 100-year celebration, there hasn't been a pool there in probably about 25 years. There's been a slide that has a splash pad at the bottom of it. It's been a park for longer than 100 years. To me, what's truly significant about the Earl Haig Park, it's all about the name Earl Haig. That's a large part of it. And it strikes me if you're going to have a celebration of that park and its history and what it means to the entire community, it's all tied in very, very closely to Earl Haig. And so thus, I think this makes sense. If you're going to have a big 100-year celebration, that's the year to have it in. So with that, unless there's any other debate on the amendment, I'm going to call the vote on the amendment. Mr. Clerk. To the amendment, Councillor Van Tilburg.
To the amendment. I ask that you don't support this amendment. I ask that you support the history of the property that was given to the city, that the city acquired, to put that there in a community that has looked this up. It's funny, I might question some of the speakers that were here earlier today with the museum, looking for some money, what their comments might be on this. But I'm sure they'd come up with 100 years. And I think we know it's 100 years. And I think somebody playing that it's not 100 years and that's 2029, probably playing semantics. That's what it appears to me. Honest, right now, I am so frustrated in Ward 5. In the last two resolutions, I think everybody in Ward 5 might be pretty frustrated with the antics of this council and decisions we're making and the outcomes. No,
okay, hang on. Point of personal privilege.
Certainly.
You're accusing us of antics. My understanding of the debate has been that it's been very focused on logic. And if you're going to have a 100-year celebration, you have it on a 100-year anniversary. I could say to you, Councillor Van Tilburg, that maybe there's a other hidden agenda to this resolution.
So
you can't fit it to 100 years.
Point of order.
So I would ask you
Point of order.
to withdraw on a point of privilege, to withdraw the allegation you've made against the.
Very good. I withdraw that and I will continue.
Thank you.
You are correct. But it is how I feel. And I've withdrawn it. So funny that you say that, because I would not want to be wrong any more than anybody else in this room. So when that was floated about, and I believe it came to Mandy first, and then later other people are asking me about it. It's got to be close, it's got to be around here. Did we pass it? Did we miss it? So we went to staff. Staff did the research for us. They had said, no, that's not it. That's not it. It's later. You know what I would have said? Oh, okay, community, it's later. I would have said to Mandy, okay, it's later. That's what I would have said. But you want to decide it's something different. So I've put this all on the weight of this council and how you have respect for Ward 5.
Call the vote on the amendment.
The amendment to item 7.4 carries on recorded vote as 7-4. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows. Councillors McCreary, Marn, Sless, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councillors Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Samwell.
Let's move to notices of motion. And, yes, sorry, well, the resolution then now as amended. Any debate on the resolution?
Excuse me, Mayor.
as amended?
As the member left, he made a comment that this assembly was disgusting. I just like the assembly that didn't hear that to know.
Well, there are other means and methods of dealing with that. So let's deal with the resolution as amended. Any discussion or debate on it? All right, call the vote.
Item 7.4 as amended carries on a recorded vote of 7-3. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows. Councillors McCreary, Marn, Slez, Caputo, Sullivan, Sokoli, Mayor Davis, members opposed, Councillors Hunt, Carpenter, and Samwell.
All right, notices of motion. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City of Brantford supports the Brantford Red Sox IBL baseball team. Thank you.
And Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you. Notice of motion regarding the naming of the Ted Bear Baseball Diamonds.
Thank you very much. That completes our agenda for this evening. This meeting's adjourned.